The public meeting to order. Sorry for being 11 minutes late, but let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As far as changes to the agenda go, I guess I'm gonna maybe recommend that
They'll take my superintendent's report space.
what's that?
They would.
No, I was talking about the Charlie's item as far as the data dashboard. I don't know. Charlie, I'll leave it up to you. Would you rather talk about that sooner or save it for the end?
It's up to the board.
Matters.
I can do it either way.
If nobody's got an opinion on it, I'll leave it where it is.
Okay.
All right. We'll move to the first session of public comments. So there is nobody in the room from the public to make a comment. So I'll open up to the online audience. Please raise your hand and you can make a public comment per the policy that is appearing and scrolling by on your screen. So I'll give it a few minutes. Seconds, we don't. It's been, I think, months since we've had a public comment, so.
Online anyway, yeah.
Online, yeah. Certainly. Okay, just let me know if in the, I don't want to deny anybody the opportunity if we start moving on and somebody's got a public comment and chimes in late, certainly. We'll go back, but we'll have another session of public comments at the end. So we will move on to the student representatives report. So welcome, Jaden.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep it short and sweet tonight. Hoops for Hope had incredible attendance. Thank you to everyone in the public community, from Monadnock, from us, admin who showed up. It was an incredible day. We got some incredible photography as well. I'm sure I'll include that in a slideshow at some point soon. And we had 2 winning basketball games against Monadnock. They were good sports about it. And it was just a very positive day. I don't have an exact number for how much the National Honor Society raised and donated at this time, but it was very successful. From sponsorships previous to the event itself alone, it was a substantial fundraising event. And with that being said, winter athletics are coming to a close. Have about a week and a half to a week till senior nights start popping up for basketball, cheerleading, wrestling, etc. So it's coming to a close. I'm personally a little sad, but it's something to look forward to for a lot of learners here, excuse me. Next, since the semester changed, we are into the 3rd quarter. We are having some issues with seniors retrieving back their privileges, just because grades are taking a while to come back in and to get that verification process completely through the work. So we're getting a little antsy, but we'll be fine. And we're also trying to navigate the new capstone requirements for graduation, as we are the first senior class to have that as a graduation requirement. It's a very exciting process. It requires a little bit of patience, but it also requires a lot of effort coming from our end. So I'm excited to see how these will be able to kind of forge our minds and our plans for the future, because I think that they will be incredibly beneficial. We just got to work out a few of the kinks first. Mentor groups are still participating in weekly counseling activities, the majority of which are being scheduled by Mrs. Baker in the counseling department. They're still very lively. We're doing them once or twice a week. It's a nice little break from kind of just sitting around doing work. Gets everybody up and active and talking. I also wanted to open it up to the board, and I was wondering, in response to my presentation last Monday, I was wondering what you wanted to see next. You know, who you wanted to speak, who you wanted me to kind of allow to share their platform more. Obviously, I have a few ideas in mind, but whatever you think will benefit yourselves to hear the most. I just want to know your opinions on that.
Are you up for a challenge?
Always.
I personally, I think that it would be helpful for us and for the community to see something maybe from the middle school.
Mhm.
I think that we see a lot of elementary school and there's a lot of visibility on high school activities, but the middle school can sometimes be a bit of a, not as visible.
Yes.
So I know that you're not in middle school, but that's why I said, certainly that might be a challenge, but,
Right.
but you asked my opinion, so.
Of course.
They're kind of my thoughts on it. I'd love to see something like from the middle school.
Perfect. Any other thoughts, ideas?
She's like, anything
I'd be-
easier.
I'd be curious to know what your thoughts were. You said you had a couple of ideas.
Oh, yeah. I'm currently in contact with members of the Interact Club. Suitably. There's some other athletic teams that I wanted to get in touch with. Probably wrestling or swim is the route I would go, just because they're more up and coming, developmentally wise. And yes, obviously, middle school has been in my mind. I haven't overlooked that, but it is just a bit more challenging. But I can obviously.
Well, based on the
get to that.
after seeing the first presentation, I gained confidence that so there's like a downside sometimes to doing a really good job.
Oh, yeah, that's all right.
Get harder assignments.
Yeah. So,
I would also just say if, as you go about your life, if you encounter students who raise issues or a group of, a club or somebody who is just concerned about way things are going, then, that's who I want to hear from. It's fantastic to hear the good news reports, but we need to hear where the struggles are too, so that we know how to lean in and help.
Yeah, because to me, for all of the, inspiring stuff about the robotics team that came in last week, like my big takeaway as a board member is they're like practicing in an area that's not really theirs, that it's difficult, that they're,
Transporting all their gear, setting up and taking.
I mean,
care of it.
that's it's like, that's great, but why are they doing this in like the janitor's lunchroom or whatever it was? Maybe I'm exaggerating that, but custodian's lunchroom. Anyways, but yeah, having the good news, but also like, how can we help?
yeah. Okay. If there's nothing else, my next point is AP courses are in their final quarter. Last school year, we had some rather significant test scores as opposed to our school history. I know that off the top of my head, US history did very well last year. And I'm sure this year, certainly our history courses, especially European history, will be doing great under some incredible leadership from very well-trained teachers and administration. And finally, it's cold out. We all know this. Statewide sickness, probably nationwide sickness, if I'm being honest. It is taking an effect on a lot of things, you hear probably 5 to 10 people a day sniffling, coughing, whatever, and saying, oh, getting over something. It's getting rough. Our attendance rates are a little low. I'm seeing a lot of empty chairs. And with that comes confusion in your courses with what you've missed. And obviously it is the learner's responsibility to take that up with their teachers and say, hey, what have I missed, and get themselves caught up. But it is overall not the exact same experience, obviously. And there's nothing we can really do to fix that, but it is very prevalent, especially this year. And I don't know why.
Can I ask a question about that? So we switched from Google Classroom to Otis.
Mhm.
And hopefully when learners are home and they're sick, they're really resting, but maybe on that day before they could return to school and they're feeling energized or they're building up their energy. I'm wondering if they're able to navigate, or I don't know if you've had this experience,
Mhm.
but Google Classroom used to be laid out in such a way that I felt like it was kind of easy for kids to see their assignments and know where they should be. Do you feel that Otis is similar, better?
I think that I do have a little bit of a bias because I did get used to Google Classroom first. So I wasn't new, and Otis was my first thing to learn. But I will say, comparatively speaking, formatting wise, for able to see missing assignments, I do believe that Google Classroom was a little bit easier to look through. I think that Otis has incredible benefits, like our 1-to-4 grading system, obviously. But I do think that Google Classroom did have a more simplistic formatting, and your tabs were very simple, very easy to understand, and it was also more in tune with the rest of the things we use, because the most of our resources that we use academically are through Google itself. So it is just easier converting work over. Otis does have capabilities like that, but sometimes there can be little issues or hiccups. So.
Thank you.
Anything else for Jaden? Great. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
When is your senior night?
My senior night is February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Oh my gosh.
Thank
Well, have a good, I don't think we'll meet before then, so
you so much.
tell us about it. So now that we've finished that up, we'll move to the superintendent's report, and Ruben.
Sure. My part of tonight will be pretty short. I've invited some guests to speak. Due to recent conversations, certainly in the community here at the board level, and the request last board meeting for some more information relative to data and what is going on within our school district, which is nothing quite short of very impressive. So I'm excited to I've invited all three principals. One of them will be here digitally, meaning she's pre-recorded her conversation. And then you'll have two other individuals here who will speak, provide a great amount of information, be able to field any questions that you have, so that the entire board is provided the information that I think will be beneficial to them in the days and weeks to come. One of those bits of information in the days and weeks to come is the conversation of space. So we had a great presentation last time where we talked about a club having to move around. And we've been very fortunate that our club numbers have increased, our sports numbers have increased, and so forth. And yeah, as we have done that and kids have a greater sense of belonging and they're able to find their niche and be able to really go down and learn deeply in those areas, it is a challenge certainly to find locations. I think this year, just quickly, basketball has been extremely difficult because of the number of teams. We literally, for a school district that used to prides themselves on being a basketball school, never has the school been about 25% of the learners actually playing the sport. So I'm very proud of the fact that that is happening, the number of teams and so forth, and we're doing quite well in that area. More importantly, these are individuals who are learning to collaborate, cooperate, create together, and be good citizens, and do so underneath the Oriole emblem, which is great. Space is a topic for the CTE center that we continue to work toward. And today I met with the architect about their second iteration of a video that they're making, and then they'll give me all the information so I can use it for maybe to develop some short snippets here and there to for the purpose of sending that out via social media. But again, we have a pretty robust program in the area of construction trades, which includes not just carpentry, but electrical work or electrician work, plumbing, masonry, and one other. And having the right facilities for that is going to be important. We don't have a culinary arts area. Actually, in this entire system, I mean, and by system, I mean Conval, Messinic, and us. That's unheard of throughout the state. So getting that would be fantastic. We already have presented, and I don't think we need to present anymore, on the interest. And then, of course, the public safety and security, including EMT, and that plays a role in our community as well. But getting that and being able to make certain that we are helping this community, the communities of Rindge, the communities of Jaffrey, take a tangible step in purposefully, intentionally investing in their children's future and in the future of their communities from an economic standpoint or a future economic standpoint is the goal. We need to get past that. These two communities need to have some expectations for what they want their communities to be in the future, not simply thinking about the here and now, the in the moment, right in their face. A lot of misinformation out there. I follow a lot of the Facebook world, Instagram, etc. It's a lot of misinformation, a lot of anger, a lot of representation of kind of a popular theme that's out there to speak poorly of public education in general, which is something that's been put out through the government agencies and so forth. We could talk a lot about that. I encourage you to research Kentucky and see what they did with the vouchers and why they did that. Impressive. We could learn something significantly from Kentucky. Very impressed with what I've researched so far and their grassroots efforts that they had there. Finding out that, yeah, public money should not go to unaccountable private schools. We're not going to talk about whether they're religious private schools, and unaccountable. We're talking about accountability right now. If we're going to talk data, we're going to talk about outcomes, then we should be playing on a level playing field. We're not, they should have no part of it. And they certainly shouldn't be taking money from our kids here at Jaffrey Rindge Cooperative School District. So I'll turn this over to the principals to share some information, some of which has been shared or much of which has been shared with the education committee, but I don't think has really gotten here to the school board. And there's some other new things as well. And I think there'll be some challenging conversations and questions also. So I'll start, I think, from simplest to more complex. And simple meaning this one's a presentation, it's pre-recorded. You won't be able to ask Deanna here questions, but she wanted to be here. It was not something that was possible for her tonight with such short notice. But she put this together and she is more than happy to give a tour or have you stop over, ask her questions over there. She's got a lot of great things happening. So I'll start with JGS.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share the work that Jaffrey Grade School has done this year as we work towards meeting our goals. I would like to begin by saying how incredibly proud I am of the work that the staff at Jaffrey Grade School has done this year. We have worked with rigor and intentionality to meet the needs of our learners. I'd also like to thank our learners for the work that they've done. They've worked tremendously hard with a brand new ELA tool and many new supports that are in place at Jaffrey Grade School. Many thanks to the Jaffrey Grade School community for their support and collaboration with us to help our learners be the strongest learners they can be. We are so proud and so lucky. As I share with you the information on this slideshow, it's important to note that much of the data has been shared earlier this year with the EDGE committee. We are currently in our winter benchmark window now, and we'll have further data regarding that benchmark information in later February. We wanted to share some of the exciting and wonderful things Jackson Grade School has done this year and how we're working towards our goal. The data that we're going to share today is from the New Hampshire SAS test, AIMSWIM Plus, which is a benchmarking tool that we give in the fall, winter, and spring, as well as used for progress monitoring, and our MTSSB data. We're going to begin with our MTSSB data, as we've done a great deal of work around this over the last several days, months, and years. You'll see our total referral 3-year trend from 2021 to 2024. There was a large increase in 2022 to 2023. Upon analysis of this, we met as an MTSS team and Owl's Nest team to look at this information and look at these trends to determine what we could put in place to help better support our learners. Through this, we created a more systematic approach to response to intervention for behavior, including a clearer expectation around response for our Owl's Nest, an increase in the use of responsive classroom as a universal tool, the implementation of Second Step, an SEL teaching tool, and universal language regarding how we respond.
Ruben, while you have a moment,
Yep.
as we go through this, if people have questions, is it okay to, ask for a pause so that, clarifications could be?
For this right here, what I'd ask you to do is write down some thoughts or questions, because Deanna is not here. I could answer some
Right.
of them, but you're gonna see some overlap with RMS. And
Okay.
so I would imagine you'd be able to provide Nikki with some questions and she'd be able to respond as the two of them work together to
Okay.
build not just the presentation, but actually everything that they're doing within their schools, along with their staff, of course.
An increase in the use of responsive classroom as a universal tool, the implementation of Second Step, an SEL teaching tool, and universal language regarding how we respond.
Same spot. Yep, same spot. Okay. Try one more thing.
For behavior. The implementation of Second Step, an SEL teaching tool, and universal language regarding how we respond.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll ask to go onto RMS. And if this one, I'll let this buffer for a while. I listened to the entire thing earlier and it certainly went through. I don't know why. Same Wi-Fi, same building I listened this to that this is happening, but we'll see what we can do. Okay. So I'd like to introduce the principal of Rindge Memorial School, Nikki Fraley.
Thank you, Ruben. Good evening, everyone. Much of what I'm going to share tonight is in Deanna's slides, just with the JGS flair. So if Ruben's not able to get that to play right now, I feel confident that while some of our data is a little bit different, our processes are incredibly tightly aligned. And so what I'm sharing tonight, Deanna was going to share with you with her own kind of JGS tilt on it, but essentially same kind of work is happening. It just looks a little different. So just like Deanna said at the beginning of her presentation, much of the information that I'm going to share this evening has already been presented at a couple of different times to the Ed Committee, both in August when we did our large data presentation, and then also in our most recent committee presentation in January, where we provided a pretty thorough update on one of our goals, which is the goal related to our work with ELA. This evening, I'm going to recap some of that data. We pulled some of the data out from the summer just because, the volume would be here for a really long time. But really, the purpose of sharing the data tonight is to help you understand how we got to where we were at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of this school year, because it's the data that have driven the goals that we've set. And then it's the work that we are doing now that is really telling the story of where we are and what we're doing. So if you're able to go to the next slide, Ruben. So you can see the same data that we'll talk about this evening that Deanna had mentioned. New Hampshire SAS at the elementary schools is data that is gathered by students in 3rd through 5th grade. So 4 of our grade levels do not engage with New Hampshire SAS. Only 3 of our 7 grades do. But 3rd through 5th graders engage in both, math, ELA, and 5th graders also complete the science assessment as well. AimsWeb Plus has been a game changer for us for lots of reasons. We started with AimsWeb Plus last year in the 23-24 school year. Prior to that time, we were sorely lacking a universal benchmark assessment that could be administered 3 times a year in both literacy and math. At the elementary level, neither school had a benchmark system in place that was universal, that was not only tied to standards, but was also a nationwide assessment that is norm-referenced and really has a lot of good guidance and data to help support our learners. So there's a variety of assessments that are given at K and WAN. They're all administered one-to-one. It's more like an interview style assessment. Some are timed, some are not, but you really gather a complete understanding of the learner's discrete individual skills with regards to their emerging early literacy and early numeracy skills. And 2, 3, 4, and 5, the assessments shift to being mostly on the computer. There are some assessments that are still administered one-to-one, but that shift sort of happens in the 2nd grade. And then at the end there, we have our MTSS data, which relates to our kind of student behavior and how they are participating as students who are ready to learn in our school. So if you're able to go to the next one as well. So this looks just like JGS's. So we saw a spike in our behavior referrals in the 22-23 school year. I had shared when I met with Ed Committee in the summer that this is actually really interesting data, because if you had looked or asked the RMS staff for their perspective, I think that our staff would have shared that we felt that our behavior needs were actually at their lowest in 22-23, and the years either side of them, we had more significant behaviors. So the data is kind of interesting there. And we've spent some time with our MTSS team trying to understand why it looked that way, so that we can be better prepared, and that informed our goals this year. We also looked at behavior referrals by month over a 3-year trend. So 22 is blue, 2023 is red, and then last year, 2024 is green. So really looking at when are students experiencing, or when are we seeing spikes in behavior, and then looking at what else is happening at those times that may contribute to increases or decreases in behavior. So we found that the beginning of the school year, sort of settling into expectations, really starting to understand what it looks like to be a learner at their new grade level. We often saw spikes in behavior, and then also right after, sort of like this time of year, like January and February, that transition after a break and coming back. We do a lot of work, all of our work through Responsive Classroom. And we really treat that January, particularly those first few weeks in January, as being almost like a new school year, where we take time to pause, reflect, reestablish and practice again our classroom and school-wide expectations. That happens every year in all settings because of this jump in behavior referrals right after the new year. And then we dug down a little bit more to look at what times of the day Are we seeing like high levels of behavior? That middle of the day time really jumped out. I believe that JGS's data said exactly the same thing. So beginning of the year, right in January, and at RMS, we saw this big spike right around the lunchtime, recess time. Often a time for peer conflict, often a time for, while there's structures and routines in place, they are much more social in nature, and there's lots more opportunity for disagreement, for peer conflict, and then how do we support students through that time? So some trends that we had shared at the beginning of at the end of the summer was, like I've said, middle of the day consistently shows an area of challenge, and then transition and after the winter holidays. Thanks, Ruben.
I have a question that's probably most of the other board probably knows, but as far as like I'm assuming that with NTSSB comes like a very standardized structure for reporting, right? Because I've seen not necessarily this system, but when you try to compare maybe school to school or this to that,
yeah,
the sensitivity or non-sensitivity of reporting can drive the data. I'm assuming that at least within the school, there's been just looking at that, it seems like there's probably been pretty standard protocol for that sort of behavior.
Yep. So about 3 years ago, we started doing a lot of work at RMS around universal expectations, universal language, so that when we're talking about disruption or defiance or disengagement, we're all thinking about the same set of behaviors that would fall into those different categories, so that we have a common sense of what does it really look like and sound like when a student is exhibiting those kinds of behaviors. And then also working to put in place consistent responses or consistent language and approach. That's all reactionary. So on the flip side of that, we're doing a lot of proactive work where it allows students to really have a better sense and understanding proactively of what the expectations are. So we don't wait for them to struggle and then tell them what's expected, but really leading with all of that expectation first. But yeah, I would say over the course of the last 3 years, we've developed a much tighter vocabulary when we talk about student behavioral challenges. And I would say we are continuing to grow in our consistent responses to those.
Thanks.
Yeah. So academic data, like I said, at the elementary level, only 3 of our grade levels take the New Hampshire SAS assessment. Is it administered in May? So this is the most recent data that we have for you. We don't have more up-to-date data for New Hampshire SAS. This is our proficiency level for last year for ELA. We're going to go through a series of slides that focus on ELA, and then we'll look at the same set of slides focused on math. So there's 4 different levels. If you're not familiar with New Hampshire SAS, level 3 and level 4 are considered to be proficient or above proficiency. That's really what we're striving for. So you can see that last year in 3rd grade, our students who are now currently 4th graders, 53% of our student population scored in the proficient or above range. In 4th grade, it was much lower at 32%. And then in 5th grade, a really strong showing with 65% of our students who are proficient or above on their New Hampshire SAS for ELA. Remember that these students are now in the grade level above where they are there. So they're now current 4th graders, 5th graders, and 6th graders. But that's where we were at the end of last year at RMS with our New Hampshire SAS ELA data. This tells you a little bit more focus when you think about this is not a cohort of students, but it's the grade level. So 3 years, 3 different sets of cohorts of students when they're in 3rd grade. So you can see pretty consistently, if I can see over there, our 3rd grade students are pretty consistently scoring in the mid 50% range on ELA, regardless of the cohort of students. So we've got 53% in 2024, 52% in 2023, and 55% in 2022. That's great, and it's consistent. We would like to see it higher, but that's a pretty consistent, strong showing, particularly for students who it's their first experience with New Hampshire SAS. I think you went the other way, Ruben. Perfect. So same thing here with fourth grade. When I spoke earlier, I said about that that disheartening, and we're kind of disappointed with that 32% of fourth graders. We actually see this pretty consistently, that over those 3 years, instead of having our students similar to third grade who are scoring in the mid 50s, we have students performing at a lower rate in fourth grade. So been working very closely with all of our teams, but with our fourth grade team around mathematics instruction, looking closely at standards and doing that work this year. We'll talk about that a little bit further on. And then the same with fifth grade. So pretty consistently, the low to mid 50s or higher last year, with over 65 or about 65% of our students being proficient or above with New Hampshire SAS. So I feel like that when you look at other schools and districts in our area, our students are performing well. They are performing above the state average typically. Fourth grade is the one place where it's a little bit of an anomaly with regards to our 3 sets of data. But we are scoring above or right in line with the state averages, and we tend to perform a little bit higher in some areas than some of our local schools or regional schools. So the same kind of set of data with math proficiency. Again, this is just last year. So that third grade group are really knocking it out of the park last year, with 68% of our students proficient. And I should say, when I say the third grade group, I mean the students and the educators. Again, we see that drop to 32% in fourth grade for mathematics, and then 39% at fifth grade. So, third grade is what we want to see. We want to try and replicate what's happening there in other places, and that's some of the work that we've been doing this year. So again, this is the 3-year comparison. While third grade was a little higher in math this past year, again, performing pretty strongly in the mid 50s or above. Fourth grade, again, we've got this dip. Something's happening there, even with our math instruction, and our fifth grade are pretty consistent. Our best scoring was in 2022, with 51% of our student body proficient in mathematics. We've dropped since then. But if we're seeing a dip in fourth grade, there's more work to be done coming out of that, coming into fifth grade. AimsWeb Plus, like I said, last year was new to us. We administered it 3 times over the course of the year. Our fall to spring measures show that students in reading at every grade level made significant growth at every grade with regards to comparing their fall benchmark to their spring benchmark. I would actually expect to see a greater growth this year. And the reason being is because by the time we received the tool last year, we trained teachers on how to use it. Our first benchmark was not until late October, early November, whereas we assessed students right at the beginning of the school year this year. So our beginning of the school year data is actually lower than last year because we assessed students earlier. But the time for instruction will be greater over the course of the year. So I'm excited to see our spring to spring when we get to May. Deanna had started to talk about this in her presentation, that we're in the middle, literally in the middle of our AimsWeb window for winter right now. We started last week. It's a 2-week window where we assess every learner. So we're about halfway through those assessments, and we're excited to dig into the data as we get into the next couple of weeks in February. And again, the same strong growth, looking at math, every grade level, students have increased in their proficiency overall. Something to note on both of those slides is this is students that are at or above the 30th percentile. When we look at our goals in just a moment, you'll see that as the 2 elementary schools, we said, well, that's great, but we don't really believe that if you're in the 30th percentile, we're comfortable saying you'll get that success. So we've actually increased it this year to the 40th percentile. We're considering students to be at or above proficient in AimsWeb if they're meeting the 40th percentile or higher. We felt like 30th percentile was just not going to cut it for us. So we took all of this data and so much more and kind of came up with our key takeaways, whether it's the academic, which is that, you know, we're seeing students in AIMSweb make this great growth on discrete skills. It's assessing skills, but we're not necessarily seeing the impact of that in the growth with New Hampshire SAS. I mean, it had only been a year. Because AIMSweb assesses discrete skills and New Hampshire SAS assesses the application of those skills. And so it's great to see our students making growth with the skills, but we also want to see growth with them, applying them in context with complex tasks. We know that we needed to continue to strengthen our PLC practices and continue to refine our data-driven dialogue in our PLCs in order to be able to continue to move our students forward. So this was all of the information that you can go to that one, Ruben, that you can't read on this slide. We have 4 goals. One focuses on strand 1 is MTSS. We took off the B because we didn't want to only focus on like that multi-tiered system of support with regards to behavior. We want to focus on it with regards to behavior, student health and wellness, as well as academics. So our goal there is around MTSS, academic and behavioral health and wellness. We have a math skills and instruction goal that talks about increasing student proficiency, both in AIMSweb and New Hampshire SAS. Our literacy skill and instruction goal is really about refining and adjusting our practices with regard to instruction, which we've been able to do with the implementation of a new or multiple new literacy tools at the elementary level, the biggest one being Wit and Wisdom. But also in pre-K, K, and 1, we've introduced Hegarty, which is a phonemic awareness program. And then also continuing on with our work with Foundations, which has been long-standing in our schools, which is phonics instruction, which is geared towards kindergarten through 3rd grade. And not to leave preschool out, our last goal is around extending our use of universal screeners and data-driven instruction to also include our preschool learners. So they are now working with something called the Desired Results Developmental Profile, the DRDP, which is a universal assessment tool that we've begun using this year to track the developmental milestones of our preschoolers. So we'll share about that in a moment too. So now this is new information for you. Some of it has come to Ed Committee before, but only with regard to strand 3. So this is all new information. So what have we been doing, right? The data says that we are in a place where there's a great opportunity for growth. And so how do we grow in a way that benefits our students, not just academically, but in their social emotional development as well? So we have established as part of our goals, this goal itself, the MTSS goal has 4 substrands, one being refining and updating our learner support process, ensuring that if students are struggling, teachers have access to support within the school to quickly respond intentionally and in a very timely way to put interventions in place to help them move forward. We don't want students to sit and struggle unproductively. We want to be able to get them the help that they need. And then with that, our teachers are teaching all content areas, a range of students. So how do we support our teachers to meet the needs of students? So we've developed this tiered process of supporting both staff and students that begins in that tier 1 section. It begins at the PLC level, discussing student data weekly, addressing interventions or extensions that are needed, looking at progress monitoring data and then making adjustments, and then having a process for what happens if this is not working. So we're putting these interventions in place. We're not seeing the growth that we would like to see. So what happens next? So it's very timely. It's very intentional to ensure that students, we don't lose time in helping them to grow. Our MTSS team we had a little bit of a delay in getting up and running. We had some school personnel challenges that we had to deal with in the fall, with part of our administrative team being out for a prolonged absence. And our capacity to meet all our goals. That was something that we sort of put on the back burner. But now we're up and running, now in the new year, up and running. And I'm excited about really getting this process underway. But the legwork for the structure is in place. Now we're just poised to be in the process. The next part of that MTSS goal was the development of an eagle's nest, sort of modeled after the owl's nest that was established at JGS last year, where the behavior support staff and school counselor works very closely as a combined unit to support the social emotional needs of students throughout their day. We did a lot of visioning work, included not only that staff RMS admin, but also SAU student services admin to really vision what it is that we hope our Eagle's Nest programming and space will look like and feel like and provide to students. So this statement here about really our goal for the Eagle's Nest, or our intention, is that it's supporting learners to be regulated, engaged, and use socially appropriate and functional language to express their needs and wants. And we're going about that a lot of different ways. We are collecting data to track how many students are accessing the space. So as of maybe 2:58 this afternoon. The nice thing about when you embed a chart in a slideshow and it's connected to where the data comes from, you can just press refresh. So it's as current as it can be. We've had 202 learner visits to the Eagle's Nest to date this year. The two graphs that are there, the one on the left, is identifying what are the reasons for the students to be there? And it's a check all, it's not a one or the other. So for example, a student might have visited the Eagle's Nest because they have self-selected a break and they're there to regulate. They might be feeling distracted or not quite ready to learn in the classroom. They're going to that space to regulate so they can be back in the classroom, but they've also asked to go themselves. It might be an earned break. It might be an incentive that is part of their daily goal practice, that once they've met certain goals, they can take a break. They can take a break in that space. So there's lots of different reasons why students can access that space and then move on. There's another graph that I did not put in there, but it shows the amount of time that students have stayed in that space. And I would say most students are spending between 5 and 15 minutes in the Eagle's Nest, and they're ready back to learn. They're ready to go back to their class. This is not a place where people come to hang out for the rest of the day or a place to go to avoid what's happening in the classroom, but it's a place to go get your needs met, be ready to learn, return to the classroom, and out they go and off they go back to class. Chris?
Yeah, just a question, not necessarily the person's name, but who do they meet with there?
Yep. So and I can share names. We have an incredible duo. It's just 2 staff. So it's Julie Basso, who's our behavior support staff, and then also Jess Strasberg, who is our school counselor. For the first time this year, their rooms are next to one another. There's a picture on the next slide. They have an interconnecting door, which is very rarely closed unless they're working on, confidential matters with students or with staff. Both of the spaces are really established to provoke and build that sense of calmness, safety, regulation. Learners can access the rooms throughout the day. And the rooms are really set up for when I come into the space, what do I need to do to get myself back on track? So it's really exciting to see our capacity this year to be able to do that. Can you just go back to though, Ruben, because I want to speak to the pie graph there. So of the students, so we both use Educators Handbook and ALMA to record behavior referrals. So this is behavior that has risen to a level that it needs to be documented. Many of these visits are not behavior referrals. In fact, if you look at the pie chart there, the red is the visits that did not result in a behavior referral. So these are more proactive, in the moment, timely, quick visits to help students get back on track. Of all of the visits, I think, is it like 13%, Ruben? You can see on your, it's about 13%.
Yeah, 14%. Yep.
Actually resulted in a behavior referral, which means they get documented in our system within Alma. So I'm actually really excited because it means that the space is being used as we had intended, as a proactive place to help students navigate whatever it is that is causing them a challenge in that moment and then be ready to be back to learn. So the spaces, and then those two individuals, those two staff members in collaboration with other staff, typically are unified arts staff. So we have a variety of different self-focused interventions. So we've got busybody PE, obviously with the PE teacher. We have a therapeutic art intervention in collaboration with our art teachers. We have a goal crushes intervention. I'm going to speak to that in a moment. STEM Stars, so our new STEM teacher this year is providing an intervention either with the school council or behavior support, and then also a BrainWise intervention. If they have asterisks, an asterisk, it means it's a multi-grade programming opportunity. So we may have students from kindergarten, first, second grade all coming together for that intervention. We may have students from third, fourth, and fifth. Sometimes we have students from fifth and first, because it allows our fifth graders to have a leadership opportunity, but also allows our younger learners some peer guidance as well. Oh, and I was going to speak to Goal Crushes. So that's a really interesting. So right now, our Goal Crushes, the students have they're setting goals, thinking about goals that they want to have and setting them, and then working to accomplish them. So one of the goals that they have at the moment is around jump roping, which is not a lifelong skill, right? Like most people can get through life with not necessarily knowing how to jump rope, but it requires so many skills, whether it's OT skills, fine and gross motor. It requires sort of like that wellness, like my body is well and I'm healthy and I can jump rope. It requires communication because not only they jump roping individually, but they're, what I would consider like old school double Dutch, like people are spinning the ropes. It's fast, it's too fast, it's too slow. So communication skills, and then setting and accomplishing goals. And so this group of learners, I think we've had about 38 learners engage in some kind of SEL intervention so far this year in some of these groups or beyond. The targeted lunch bunches don't include these students. That's a whole different middle of the day intervention, because we knew that we had that middle of the day challenge from our behavior data that we looked at earlier. So it's pretty exciting stuff. Still in goal 1, but now we're thinking about what are we doing with regards to our learner academic interventions. We have made incredible strides. Chris?
Sorry, I
That's
asked
okay.
a lot of questions.
That's okay.
Again, this is newer to me, I think, than some members of the board, but like in your mind, like I look at that and that looks good. What happens if you don't do that? In your mind, like all these interventions, I think is a response to behaviors. And if like, I guess
If we were to go back,
the layperson, right? They're saying, well, what are we getting out of that?
Okay,
So
if we were to go back,
great new program and you're doing this and it all looks cool, but I'm assuming it connects to some data and it's a response to something that you've seen that's going to weave its way into improving learning.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely. So if we were to go back, I would think if we didn't do these things, one more, Ruben, if we didn't do these things, I think that pie chart might look the same, but the red part would be behavioral interventions or behavioral referrals, and the blue part would not be.
Okay.
I think that we would see many more students experience dysregulation to a higher level that would require more significant intervention. So could that result in greater numbers of in or out of school suspensions? I really feel that it could, because we're not able to equip students with the skills and strategies that they need to be able to navigate their school day, those peer interactions. Without all of that intervention and also the tier 1 work that is being done through Second Step, responsive classroom, consistent school-wide expectations, all of that foundation that we have laid, that is a really strong foundation now, over the last 3 years, I think that our data would look very different, or it would, the graphs would look the same, but the descriptor would be flipped. Does
And
that
I
answer your
imagine
question?
like, yeah, and I imagine like disruption
Yeah.
to other learners that aren't having these issues.
Yeah, and then the impact on the individual learner, right? Like it doesn't feel good to not feel good. And so if we just ignore that one student or those students who are having those feelings, it's going to grow, right? That feeling of self-worth, of connectedness to the people that I go to school with understand me, they see me, they hear me, they respond to the needs that I have, would be gone. And then we would have greater problems. Academic data, I was just saying, we have made significant, like I cannot think of a better word to describe the overhaul that we have made this year to our learner academic interventions. We have one math interventionist and one literacy interventionist for the whole school. So that's 2 people. This, much like our interventionists in the Eagle's Nest, they are a perfect match, and they are committed. I wanted to use the word relentless, but I know some people take a negative connotation to that. They are deeply committed to ensuring that students are successful, as well as everybody else. But it's been a shift for us this year. So like I said earlier, universal assessments are given 3 times a year in both literacy and math. Our interventionists are working very closely with classroom teachers on a weekly basis to determine whether students should or should not be in an intervention. This year, we've actually created very clear entrance and exit criteria for interventions. So it's not because you are geographically located close to the interventionist classroom, or because you have the same lunch group or lunchtime as them, but it's really done intentionally, with the priority focus being in the early grades, because that's where we know and we can have the biggest bang for our buck. So students can access interventions if they are below the 40th percentile in AIMSweb. From there, we look very closely at those individual skills. We identify which is the skill that is impacting them the most, but on a progression. So we go back to the skill that's impacting them the most, that is the least complex skill, and we build from there instead of working backwards. Students can exit an intervention either once they've met 40th percentile in their target area, their goal is met, or other context, other things about that learner. So currently this year, we've had 65 students participate in academic interventions for literacy and 50 students for mathematics. One of the things that we're doing an incredible job with is tracking and monitoring their interventions. So I just took this as a snapshot. It's one of the great things about AIMSweb. This is a first grader's progress monitoring data from a targeted skill. I know it's hard to see from where you are, but all the little tiny black dots are individual assessment data to show their growth. There's a black line, 2 black lines that have like triangles in the middle that come all the way down. That reflects a change in intervention. So what's happened is the student's gone into an intervention. There's not very much growth. Nothing's happening quick enough, or not the right things are happening quick enough. The team has gotten together and said, this isn't working. We need to adjust the intervention. They've changed the intervention. They've marked it. And then we see great growth. Then we see it kind of stagnate again, change the intervention. And then we've got great growth again. So this student is well on their way to making growth. But these are the conversations, and this is the data that PLC teams and team leaders, through the support of our interventionists, are looking at once every 12 days. We have our day 1 PLC team meeting. So they meet on day 1. The next day one is common planning, but this kind of work is happening. So it's timely, it's intentional, it's data driven, and it's focused. So it's pretty exciting, because until really, I mean, we were doing some work with this last year. We didn't have necessarily the right people to round out that team, but now we do, and they are just running with the data and making really timely instructional decisions to support learners where they are. So it's pretty exciting. Our second goal of 4 is our goal focused around math skills and instruction. You could see, if you think back to that New Hampshire SAS data, 3rd graders are doing pretty well. We've got a dip in 4th grade. 5th graders are doing okay-ish. And so how do we support this? So our math interventionist is providing coaching and collaboration at every grade level. So she is not only helping grade level teams identify the right assessments to give that are formative and very timely, but she's also analyzing the results with them. They do work called a select and sequence, where they take the student work, they select work samples, they take it back to the students, they show a progression of skills, and then do some in the moment instruction with that. They're using this tool that's on the left-hand side. This is from OGAP, the Ongoing Assessment Project. And this is an additive reasoning progression. So really showing the progression of students' ability to reason mathematically within the area of addition. The same thing exists for subtraction, multiplication, and division. But every team is engaging in that work with the math interventionist, as well as she's providing intervention. The problems that they are facing, those OGAP items, are not multiple choice. They are not straight computation problems, but really thinking of problem solving. So kind of getting closer to what students are engaging with New Hampshire SAS. And then all grade levels are expected to keep and maintain data walls to show what is happening in the classroom as well, with regards to their common assessments and instruction. And then they are regularly meeting and making adjustments based on what they're seeing on their classroom common assessments, which when I first started here 6 years ago, our classroom teachers, even in the same grade level, were not able to do this because they weren't using the same instructional tools. They weren't necessarily using the same assessments. They weren't necessarily using the same rubrics. So in that time, in that 6 years, our teams have made significant growth that they can really have this conversation, but it's also consistent across both elementary schools. So when a student takes a mission, an end of module assessment in math in 2nd grade at RMS, students at JGS are engaging with the same assessment. So it's not only great growth within our own buildings, but it's great growth across the 2 schools. The literacy skills and instruction, this one has been, I know the Ed Committee has seen all of these slides so far because we just did our update with our work with literacy. I would say, while we're doing all of this work with our other grades, the big heavy lift across K to 8 has been our literacy focus. So we have 3 new instructional tools in place at RMS and JGS, Wit and Wisdom, Heggerty, and then also Geodes, which connects to Wit and Wisdom. It's a, I want to say level 3, but that's not. It's a set of decodable texts that aligns with Foundation. So it kind of really wraps together and ensures that we're providing instruction to students in all aspects of Scarborough's reading rope. We're no longer neglecting a particular strand, but we really have a comprehensive approach to literacy instruction to ensure that all of those strands of Scarborough's reading rope are being addressed, assessed, instructed daily in all of our classrooms. So we talked about, no, you're good, Ruben. We talked about, when we shared last time, we talked about the extensive amount of formal professional development that has gone into this work. Starting in June, where all district administrators engaged in the lead Wit and Wisdom training. with a facilitator. Her name is Karen Carpenter from Great Minds. She's been back to us every single time. So we have that consistency for our staff. All staff K to 8 engaged in the launch Wit and Wisdom training. If you are a direct teacher of literacy, that was a 6-hour professional development. If you're not a direct teacher of literacy, so like our unified arts teachers, our paraeducators, they also receive training. That was a 3-hour training right at the beginning of the year in those PD days. Since then, K to 8 teachers, Wit and Wisdom is broken down into 4 different modules. You do a very comprehensive deep dive into each module before you begin instruction, so that you're not teaching lesson by lesson with no sense of where you're going, but you really start with the end of module end of module assessment, and then unpack the work that you're going to do to get there. So our teachers have engaged in professional development with Karen Carpenter about how to do that. And then all of our early release time up to now has been spent with our teams cross-building. So all 3rd grade teachers in the district, all 1st grade teachers, and so on, meeting together to do that deep dive and deep analysis of the tool, so that they are prepared to every extent possible to engage in the instruction that is coming up. Our K to 2 teachers also receive some formal training with GEODS. Like I said, that is the reading program, the reading materials that are closely aligned to foundations. So when you're learning phonics skills, you're now addressing those phonics skills in connected text, and are seeing those in print and reading. And then we've also done some coaching work. The elementary administrators had the opportunity to work with Karen to do some coaching work about what are some of our next steps in how to support teachers. Like I said, we've used our early release time, and then we've also been able to provide grade level release time by securing substitute teachers, so that grade level teams can get together and continue to dig into the curriculum materials. So again, they can internalize them, so that then when they're in front of students, they're feeling more confident, more knowledgeable, and have a clear understanding of where they're going, so that they can engage in instruction. Next steps, we are working, I believe we're meeting with folks from Great Minds on one of our March PD days as an administrative team to do some more coaching work. We're really excited about doing some targeted professional development around the strand of writing, and then a fluency on focus. There's also a piece of PD or training that Wit and Wisdom or Great Minds provides that is about urgency. And it's this sense of we have a scope and sequence and a pacing guide. And while we don't want our teachers to teach in a way or instruct in a way where they're feeling like they're in crisis and we've got to go, it also balances this need of, I'm going to go too slow and I'm going to back up. So this sense of urgency. So we're moving with our instructional tools in really intentional ways, so that students are able to be exposed and have instruction in all of the standards by the end of the year. This is sort of like what we've done again in a different format. So starting in June. So really, when you think about it, it's only 7 months. It's kind of incredible the amount of professional development work we've done. All grades are now working in module 2. So while we've had some sort of like pacing struggles as we've gotten going, we're making good progress, and all grade levels are now working in module 2. And I think that, you'll see some of this student work when you're at the deliberative session on Wednesday night, because we'll have some work out for you to see. I cannot speak to the rigor of the work. I cannot speak enough to the rigor of the work that students are being asked to engage with these new literacy tools. It is light years ahead of what we were doing before. And we were doing great things before. But it is taking that depth of knowledge, depth of understanding, and the ability to be able to speak, listen, and write in very complex ways to a totally different level, which is really exciting to see. I know we had shared some writing samples. This is just from a first grade class. I know Deanna had some from a second grade class, probably in her presentation. You can go on, Ruben. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen a shift with as well is the instructional practices. So it's not just about the content, but it's how the content is being instructed. So it kind of goes back, Chris, to your to your question earlier about, well, what happened if we didn't do these SEL interventions? If we weren't providing these SEL interventions and we weren't using responsive classroom and we weren't using second step tier 1, our students would not be prepared to engage in instruction in the way that we're expecting them to. They're engaging in Socratic seminars in kindergarten and first grade. You talk about complex conversation. The teacher is there. They're present. They're recording student conversation, but it's a student-led Socratic seminar in kindergarten, first grade, and all the way up to 8th grade. They wouldn't have those skills, or some students need those SEL interventions in order for them to have a more level playing field to be able to engage in this kind of work. Same with things like a jigsaw activity. This is when students take responsibility for a part of the content. They get to know it deeply, and then they present it to the rest of the class. Not removing the teacher, but the teacher is really taking on the role of being the facilitator of instruction, and the students are the ones that are doing the really hard work. And some of them have feelings about that sometimes. Sometimes it's hard. And so we're working on making sure that that struggle is productive, and providing accommodations and modifications as needed, but they're doing incredible work. And then our last goal, which is almost, sorry, there's so much to share. So our last goal is just on one slide. We talked about how we have this universal benchmark system K-8 with AimsWeb, what is developmentally appropriate for preschool. So you can see at the beginning of the year, all of our administrators as well as preschoolers engaged in professional development with regards to the scope of the tool, how to use it, and then some work around getting familiar with what the tool is really asking us to do. We gave the benchmark assessment to all preschool learners in the fall. We coupled those reports with our report cards and shared those with families. In this winter assessment time, we're assessing new referrals or students who are new to our preschool who have entered with IEPs, as well as new learners. And then at the end of the year, we'll do our final benchmark assessment. And then we'll be able to do, because it's our first year, we'll be able to do some deep reflection and analysis about kind of reflecting on our process and where is there opportunity for improvement, but also analysis of our student progress as measured by the DRDP, and how that we can use that to inform kindergarten teachers about where students are coming in, where their developmental milestones are, and how we can be better prepared to meet their needs as they enter kindergarten in the fall. And I'd like to say that's it, but it's not. It is the last slide. But now I could probably talk for just as long about all the things that we are doing at RMS that are not on the slides. We are creating a safe, inclusive, welcoming school community that is focused on learning and growth for all students. And I think there's been a couple of things in the last little bit of time that has really highlighted this for me, is that once a student or a family is no longer at RMS, they're maybe at the middle school or beyond, they are still deeply connected to RMS. And that cannot be shown on these slides. And I know that because people have called us in the last couple of weeks to say, can I talk to you about this problem? Can we connect? Can we talk about this challenge that we're facing as a family? We've had students who are no longer RMS students come back to RMS and say, can I just be here for a little while? This is a safe space for me to be. This is a place that I feel connected. Can I be here for a little while? And the answer is yes. The way that we are growing humans at RMS and JGS and the middle and high school is exceptional. And the work that our educators and our families, because we're doing it together, are putting into these youngest of learners is overwhelming, it's inspiring, and it's wonderful. And I expect to see some of those measures at the end of the year, New Hampshire SAS and Ames Web, show the impact of all the work that is happening. But even if we fall short on some of those measures, there is so much more that is happening. If we rest on just those measures, we are missing the boat. We're missing the boat on what our job is as educators, because it's so much more. Those test scores are so important, but they are one piece in so much more. And I hope that kind of shows through in the way that we've set our goals, the work that we are doing with intention and urgency to ensure that our students, when they leave kindergarten, they're ready for first grade, they're ready for fifth grade, they're ready for sixth grade, and they're ready for life beyond that, and that they are competent, caring, well-rounded humans. And the staff at RMS and the families we're doing it together, and it's really exciting.
So Nikki, you've just done a wonderful job of explaining not only the steps you're going through with the students and with the staff, the professional development. And, we've been talking a lot as a board about student achievement on state tests. I see you're working towards that. The last thing you said, and I know this is implied in all of the work that you're doing on multi-tiered systems of support, is, you say that there's so much more. And I guess it's the last thing you just said, that you're trying to produce well-rounded, confident human beings.
Yeah.
What more? Is there anything more you can? I think that's the part where a lot of people get hung up thinking that, well, yeah, of course that's important, but
Yeah.
What, I don't know. How does it impact their learning? I guess I'm asking you to restate what you've already been stating. I don't summarize.
Yeah, I think, and I'll go back to sort of like our work with Responsive Classroom and our work with Second Step. We are building a strong foundation for everything else that we do to sit upon. So when we create classroom communities that are safe, welcoming, inclusive, we lay a foundation that means that when students come to learn, they are available for the instruction. If we have students in our classrooms who are dysregulated, or they're hungry, or they didn't sleep well at night, or they have stress and worry of things that are impacting them, it doesn't matter how great the lesson is that is being provided by the classroom teacher. If they're not available for those things, it really doesn't matter. So that has to come first. So I think that is one of the things that it's implied through all of these slides and all of the work that we're doing, is that we lay that foundation first, and then we can build on it. And I think we have an exceptionally strong foundation at RMS because of all of the work that is sort of exemplified by these goals and the growth that we're making to ensure that we continue to say, good isn't really good enough. We want to continue to grow and thrive so our students can. I think some of the measures of our student success, we don't realize them until they're in the middle and high school and beyond, right? Like we don't have AP tests and how many students are going to college and how many students are going into a career at the end of fifth grade. We don't have the same measures that the middle and high school have. But I know that our impact at the elementary level sets the middle and high school either up for success or not, based on the work that we've done.
So how can you do anything about whether these students are hungry or whether they've slept well? What can you do about that?
We work with families. We invite families to come in and to talk to us, to share their concerns with us, to share their challenges with us. We help people get connected to other programs, whether it's through the River Center. We help students get extra snacks and food when they need it. We work to help to eliminate as many of those barriers as possible by working with our community organizations, with our staff community, but also with families. Christine?
I have a question that almost sounds silly to say, but when I think about all the comments that I've been hearing, and I'm wondering if this isn't the heart of the matter, can you define what proficiency is? If somebody says, if I hear the word 50% of students are proficient, that almost sounds inadequate. And so I'm wondering what proficiency means on tests and in schools.
So while you consider that question, I'm just going to say that I just checked out Deanna's, and it's still spinning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send her presentation to the school board. Having engaged in this one right here, you're going to have a good understanding. You'll see some of the certainly the language data will look different, but conversations will be similar, so it'll be helpful, I think. We will also make sure that all of these presentations are up online for anyone to be able to access. Certainly Deanna's is going to be then the most accessible because of the voiceover. But if they want to click on an item rather than see the video itself. So we'll do that. And then I welcome also, maybe this is a good time to transition so that as you have a conversation, you might have an answer as well, David, and we can get right into your conversation as well. Because I think that topic will.
Yeah, but to speak to the
We'll be
piece
head
around
up again.
proficiency, what does proficiency really mean?
Yeah.
New Hampshire SAS or AIMSweb data is data from a point in time on a given day. That's what it is. So to me, like I think about the analogy of like going to the doctor, right? If you go to the doctor once a year and they take your blood pressure and it's within the normal range, and then people say, well, my blood pressure is good, so I am healthy. But your blood pressure is only one measure of your overall wellness and health, right? So for me, and some measures are more important than others, for sure. So for me, if we only focus on one or two measures, we're not looking at the health and the wellness of the whole student. So to me, it's looking at our in and out of school suspension data. It's looking at our behavior referrals. It's looking at the amount of students who are accessing the Eagle's Nest. It's looking at student data of the number of students that are in interventions. And we get to be really granular. We can't provide that level of it, that granular information to you because it's specific to individual learners. But we can look within our school at an individual learner, and we can look at many, many, many data points to determine if that student is well or proficient, instead of looking at one or two data points in isolation. So to me, proficient is when we have many, many measures that are all saying this student is achieving success or is well in all of these factors, whether they be academic or social emotional. I think that's the best way I could describe it.
I'm remembering, if I can go back, and I might butcher this, but I feel like when we were switching to the 1 to 4 grading system, someone had this great analogy saying, well, 1 is like, you've never seen a car. or you've never been in a car, or two is basic knowledge of how to drive, right? And so proficient is, using that analogy, is that you can drive.
Yep.
But maybe you can't teach someone else how to drive. Is that basically?
Yep.
So when people hear, even on the singular data point of standardized testing, that students are proficient, it is saying that they are capable of driving the car.
Yep.
Right? Is that, am I using that analogy correctly?
Yep.
Something about that word that sounds almost like it's saying inadequate, but that's not the case.
Well, also through the course of time, and even within the assessment tool that we're using right now, it's been different. The definition of proficiency has changed. As the assessment changes, so does the concept of proficiency. And so if you were to go back during the NECAP years, you would go back and say, oh, wow, we were more proficient then. But NECAP didn't measure high depth of knowledge. It was largely multiple choice. You could do well on a test like that by practicing how to take a test. You can still do some of that with this current assessment by getting used to the types of rigorous problems and so forth, some of which you'll see here. But it is, in general, you need to, as Nikki alluded to, with Ames Web focusing on skills and this skill and this skill, and then the New Hampshire SAS looking at the integration of all those skills for the purpose of solving a problem. Those are very different sets of skills. And in general, learners typically do well on state assessments, especially high difficulty state assessments, when they have high expectations in all areas of their life, that their community supports it, their community doesn't try to openly go online or in the public and bash public schools or decide that it's not something that's worth supporting or anything of that nature. Students don't need to hear that. Certainly families, high expectations at home, and that they work with the school, not try to fight against the school. And then, of course, the school itself, making sure that all of the work that's going into each and every one of these children is done so with high expectations. They can learn. Not only can they learn, we're going to get them to the learning. And so what I heard from Nikki was, these are the ways, yeah, we believe that they can learn. They can learn all at high levels. They learn so in different timeframes in different ways, as is our belief. But here's all we're doing. Here are the structures that we're putting in place. Here's all the professional development, the work that we are doing on a regular basis to make sure that we are providing them the best we possibly can, so that we are, at least in this environment, providing those expectations. I would love to see what would happen if we had all those environments setting those high expectations and communicating that in that education, regardless of whether it's an straight academic education or a career-based education, doesn't matter, that it's important and that we're going to support you regardless.
So I'm titling this CMHS updates tonight because, again, much of this was shared at education committee meetings in the summer timeframe. I have added quite a bit, and I'll try to go through some of the stuff quickly if I feel like it's stuff we've already shared. So first, I wanted to give the board a chance to take a look. This is from the public-facing, not credentialed practice test from New Hampshire SAS. So I'd like to challenge the board to let me know what grade level you believe this math question is from on our standardized testing. Would anybody like to hazard a guess?
Fifth.
You think that's fifth grade, Charlie? What makes you think that's fifth grade?
I'm sorry?
What makes you think that's fifth grade?
Because you have to create an equation. Of course, I know we do that before fifth, but
You learned how to create equations before fifth grade?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Other guesses? Everyone agree with Charlie? This is fifth grade.
It's most likely higher. I don't think, I mean, they can, certainly at that level, they can write a simple math equation, but solving for R, I think is most likely a higher level there. It's basic algebra.
Charlie was close. This is sixth grade. Notice that this is not a multiple choice. This is a create your own adventure. Next. What about this one? Select all of the expressions that are equivalent to 10a plus 6b.
I don't even want to solve this, let alone guess. What grade level it
To get it
is.
correct, you have to have all of the correct answers, right? Anybody want to guess?
Seventh.
It's sixth again. Still sixth. What about this one?
Say sixth again before looking at it.
It's not sixth this time. So you've got a descriptor. This is a science measure. You've got a descriptor of what the table shows, a table that has one data point, and then some date kind of information. And then two tasks that relate to this chart. The first task is calculating the rates of change in first flowering dates per degree Celsius for the average species between those time frames. There's no selection. The learners have to calculate and put in to within 1 decimal point to get it correct. And then the second part is choosing the correct graph that matches the rate of change that they calculated in part A. So hopefully they got the rate of change correct.
I'm gonna say 10th grade.
10th grade? 8th grade? Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's one of the, I mean, I see my kids doing
That's not fair.
similar. Two children in middle school.
Yeah.
I'll say the work is, can be complex.
8th grade.
Yeah.
So again, complex, as Chris was saying, requires a lot of pulling of data. This requires literacy skills. It requires math computation skills. It requires data analysis skills. It requires graphing skills. There's a lot of layers to get a learner to success on this particular type of assessment. New Hampshire SAS is not NECAP. New Hampshire SAS is not AIMSweb. AIMSweb is a different type of assessment. This is an incredibly complicated measure of student learning. And learners get one shot once a year, one time in middle school on this particular science assessment to show us what they learn. So I have a reason for pointing that out, and we'll come back to it later. We have 4 goals this year as well at the middle high school that are very close to the elementary goals. We've worked very closely as all 3 schools. We spent summertime working on this. First goal, utilizing some common instructional practice and language related to high expectations in literacy across all grades and content areas. The second focused, our school decided that starting with middle school specifically, not ignoring high school, but setting our goal around the middle school math made the most sense given the need to basically bring grade levels up before they enter algebra in 9th grade. So that was to increase by at least 10% across all grade levels the number of learners who score level 3 or above on SAS. The third goal was looking at learner behaviors and time away from class, and we'll show some data on that in a bit, and trying to reduce that by at least 10% through a combination of prevention and education spanning across our 7 grade levels, and implementing a consistent professional learning community process that utilizes response to intervention across all grades, including the high school. Each one of these has a lot of sub-goals, but these were the 4 main ones.
Question, RTI, which is a tool, a name that has been around for quite some time. That is the same as MTSS?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So this is just a recap of major discipline year to date of the major categories. So I did go through in year to date the data in Educator's Handbook to show the major categories. The first bar is 2 years ago, year to date, to the same exact date as today. The middle bar is last year. The brown bar is this year, year to date. You can see some significant decreases in some of these major categories. Disrespect is a third what it was 2 years ago. Disruption is down pretty significantly from 2 years ago and from last year. Defiance has stabilized a bit, profanity up a little bit, physical aggression way down from last year, unsafe behavior down, vandalism down, vaping, which is the primary drug. The drugs we deal with are vaping, almost exclusively nicotine vapes, sometimes THC vapes. Pretty stable, a little bit of an increase this year. A little bit more harassment types of situations. But if you look at the substantiated bullying, at this point last year, we had 26 substantiated investigations of bullying. This year, we've had 9. That alone is a significant decline in the types of behaviors that can disrupt and draw learners away from their learning. However, it also sapped significant time of the counseling team, administration, and teachers, both investigating and remediating that. And you can see off the chart is our cell phone addressing this year. Of course, we've significantly tightened expectations to include hallways and common areas, and our teachers have been doing an excellent job addressing that and making sure that we can follow up. So it's not surprising that we have 4 times as many issues with that year to date because we are being much more strict in all areas of our school.
Intentionally can.
Another data point to look at the health of our organization, suspension. This is comparative rates year to date from 3 years of data. This is the number of times that suspension in school and then suspension out of school was assigned. You can see that so far this year, we've assigned in-school suspension on 94 incidents. That's down from 170 incidents at the same point last year and 112 2 years ago. And then if you look at out-of-school suspension, that is at 45, which is less than half what we had to assign last year, and on par with a couple of years
In the face of established law. Even a senior DOJ official from Trump's first term said the firings are
The
clear.
number of days of suspension is another measure to look at. Again, you can see that we are significantly below last year in both in and out of school suspension days. One of our goals was to find alternatives that were effective. We've been able to do that on a year-to-date basis and continue to look for other options for learners. However, contrary to some of the mistruths on social media, we are applying discipline tools in an increasing manner when we need to hold learners accountable for their
Anyone to
behavior.
stop them. That's the goal.
And then this is the numbers of learners who have received assignments of out of school or in school suspension. You can see that the in-school suspension count is back year to date where it was 2 years ago. The out of school suspension count is less than half what it was by this point last year and below the 2-year-ago rate. So now we're going to move into some academic data. A couple of notes as we look at College Board testing, which was 8 through 11. Now it's 9 through 11. In the fall of 2023, the College Board made a significant shift to its testing and rolled out universal computer adaptive tests. This means that in each section, learners receive a first part, and the second part is based off of how they do on the first part. You will see a consistent 2023 fall drop in scores, followed by a quick rebound as we and learners became more accustomed to that. Another thing to note is that there is not an apples to apples comparison in the expectations of the standards assessed on PSAT 10 and 11 as compared to the PSAT 8-9, because those assessments measure grade level standards, which means in 10th grade for the PSAT 10, learners are being held to higher levels of cognitive rigor on the questions than they were in 8-9 and ditto with PSAT 11. So this is just a rehashing of the data from the summer. You can see we are the gray bar. This is the overall total score. Nobody is satisfied to see that we had a significant drop from where we were in the previous year. I will provide significant context to that momentarily. Next, please. This is our evidence-based reading and writing. Obviously, in parallel with the drop in the mean score has also dropped for last year's 11th graders. Next, please. And math as well. So nothing I'm going to say next is defending that this is good news for a school. So I just want to be clear that that's not what I'm saying. But this needs significant context, and plucking it out of the air and saying this shows our school is bad, not truthful and not the full picture. Next. I just wanted to capture this. The top left is Conant Middle High School at the high school level. Those are our 3 proficiency numbers from last year. I've captured a sampling of anonymized local schools because one of the mistruths that's been spread around about our high school is that it's one of the lowest in the state. That is not true. Every school in this region suffered a significant decline in math scores last year. There's a reason for that. This year's 11th graders were in 8th grade in the 2020 to 2021 school year, which is the most critical year of pre-algebraic thinking skills. Of course, their math scores declined significantly. And if you compare where our school in the top left is to the school in the bottom left, which is another local school, Our kids are doing better in all three measures. When you compare to the bottom middle, which again is a much more well-resourced school than we are, our kids are not significantly below them. When you look at the one diagonally to the right, we're on par with them in math and essentially on par with them in ELA. When you look to the one on the top right, we beat them in math. Neither score great, but again, the statement that our high school is the worst in the region is not true. We have growth to do, but our kids performed comparably to their peers in a very difficult environment. Next, please. This is the cohort group that was measured on last year's SAT assessment that had those scores. So this is all of their College Board testing from 8th grade until 11th grade. I would point out that in math, in 8th grade, they started at a College Board raw score of 402 and ended on a score of 433 in 11th grade. Reading and writing, they started at 415 in 8th grade, ended on 473. Their overall score increased from 817 to 906. And then the next slides are just to zoom in. This is the class of 2025's math scores, evidence-based reading and writing scores, and total scores. Absolutely, they did not reach proficiency levels that we would have desired. However, they showed significant growth as a cohort over the time that they have been in our high school. They entered with very low scores. They had a really difficult time in the early parts of high school readapting and reacclimating and building up skills that some of them didn't have at all because some of those learners didn't even attend school in that time frame. Their parents had pulled them out. But they did show growth that at least by the end of this time frame recognized the work that they and their teachers did to help provide learning coming out of a very difficult time frame. This is the current 9th graders, and just to show a difference, the brown bar is the fall of this year, which is their 9th grade year. The previous two bars are 8th grade. So the gray bar is the fall of 8th grade. The yellow bar is the spring of 8th grade. The brown bar on the far right is coming in with essentially no instruction in 9th grade. So starting off in 8th grade, their math score, now this is PSAT 8-9, so this is a direct comparison with the same assessment. 375 was their score in 8th grade math. Coming into freshman year, they scored 402 in math as a cohort. Evidence-based reading and writing was 393 in the fall of 23 in 8th grade. Coming into this year, it was 441. Their mean total score, 768 to begin 8th grade. This year in 9th grade, 844. And this is comparing our 8th graders' first performance this year in 9th grade with the state public school average, which is the middle bar, and the national average, which is the brown bar. We are the gray bar. You can see that our math scores are slightly below the state and national average. Our reading and writing scores are above both the state and national average. Our total score is essentially tied with the state and is above the national average. So again, the narrative or idea that our high school kids and our high school staff and our high school are not performing is just not true. There has been growth. There's been significant investment. We have been able to continue to help our learners facilitate that growth. And this cohort is starting in a much stronger spot than the last year's 11th graders. They've had more consistent approaches to their learning. 10th grade, this current year's 10th graders. Again, the gray bar would be their 8th grade year. And you can just kind of glance across. They've shown significant growth in evidence-based reading and writing, moderate growth in math. Their overall total score has shown about a 41-point growth since 2 years ago, excuse me. And again, remembering that, no, actually that's false. Next. This is this year's 11th graders. So again, that blue bar is that fall 2023 switch over to the computerized testing, which we've seen in every 2023, that dip and that quick rebound. And then another measure so if we can go back one more slide. Again, this is the cohort that's on track for this year's SAT assessment. And starting in 8th grade, their scores were fairly low, like we've been seeing with a lot of them because they're starting in 8th grade, right? This year, this group is already above what last year's juniors had been at the PSATs they took in the fall. Still growth needed, lots of focused stuff happening the second part of the year. But again, we collect data on an ongoing basis, not just in budget season when we dip into those one figures from the previous spring. Our staff and our school and our administrators are constantly pulling from a variety of data sources. Another thing that gets no attention, but I think is just as important, is to look at our AP scores for a school, our advanced placement. How are our top learners who are engaging most efficiently in their courses doing it in some of these areas? So this is a grid that we shared at the Ed Committee that shows a view of our AP scores across a 4-year span, excuse me, a 5-year span of time. You can see that this year, 2024, even though we have significantly less overall learners, I think we're at about 100 less learners in the high school, maybe a little less than that than we were in 2020 coming into that year. We still had 62 learners this year who took assessments, and you can see that the percentage of our learners who scored a level 3 or above is higher than it was pre-COVID. Another chart kind of showing the same thing. Jaden was talking earlier about some of the areas where we've had score growth. This is the AP Calculus exam, which is quite difficult. You can see the number of exams has remained consistent, and yet our score this past year, the mean score was a 3.14, significantly higher than it had been in previous years. This is European history, which arguably, and I'm not biased at all, is one of the hardest AP exams. It's usually given in 10th grade. It's the entry, and it's incredibly difficult. Last year, we had an average score of 2.89. A lot less learners took it, but the score is still really impressive given where we had been in prior years. Perhaps even more impressively is the one below, which is the U.S. history score. 27, if you scroll down a little bit, please. You can see that we have the highest number of learners taking the U.S. history exam last year at 27, and their score was also significantly the highest across all of those grades, almost an average score of a 3. So again, our learners in these AP courses are doing very well. That's another measure of proficiency and success that unfortunately just doesn't get a lot of airtime. Now moving into middle school, this is the SAS assessments. This is ELA. This is not cohorts, but this is grade level in 3 different kind of snapshots. The gray is the 2021 to 22 school year. The yellow is the 22 to 23 school year. The brown is the last school year. And one thing I want to point out is in 8th grade, which has typically been our weakest year, even extending well beyond what this chart shows, we, in a span of only 3 years' time, our learners entering high school have gone from 29% level 3 or above in ELA last year to 53%. That's over the span of 2 years of change. Now, again, not the same cohort, but that grade level has typically been very consistently the lowest in the middle school, and that narrative has shifted. And then you can look at 7th grade, pretty consistent, and 6th grade, pretty consistent. But even in 7th grade, we're doing better now than we were 2 years ago. This is the school-wide SAS ELA in the middle school. Again, a false narrative is out there that our kids are doing horribly and have never done this badly. That's not true. You can see that in last year's overall SAS proficiency, we have now matched the 2018 to 2019 school year. So in a short span of time, our learners have rebounded and are now back on track to climb above 50% overall this school year is what we're anticipating. This is the SAS math. Very stable in 6th grade, pretty consistent in 7th grade, and then some declines in 8th grade that last year were reversed a bit. There's a reason for that. Our high school teachers had done an extensive amount of data work in their PLC and had gone in and done intervention work with the 8th graders last year, and that paid off quite a bit. Again, this is showing the since before COVID view of how our school is doing on math scores. We're basically back to where we were before COVID. The narrative that before 2018-19, somehow we were doing, gangbusters in math is just not true. We're being transparent about where we are with math. We're comparable to where they were back then, but our staff is working really hard to focus on implementing new programs, utilizing data sources and providing intervention and trying to get those scores to come up. Science, pretty stable. And then this is the growth narrative in terms of how our kids are doing on their growth on these areas. This is only measured K through 8, so I only have the middle school data. They do not provide this information at the high school level. You can see that in the 17-18 school year in ELA, the middle school growth rate was 46, which has been remarkably stable since then. And then with math, we're actually about 10 points higher on math growth than they were in the 17-18 school year. We had a really great year in the 21-22 school year. And then we have completed our winter benchmarking at the middle level for Ames Web Plus. So these are what are called tier transition charts. And as our staff are constantly dipping into data, when they get to this benchmark, they can see which learners have shifted from one tier of instructional need to another. This is 6th grade math. Almost no movement here. A very slight uptick in learners needing some tier 3 support, not necessarily the same ones who needed it before, and a very slight decrease in learners in tier 1, but very small. 6th grade reading is essentially unchanged. This is 7th grade math, very slight increase in learners who are at that kind of tier 1 universal instruction level, don't need any intervention at this time. Tier 2 had a very slight decrease. Tier 3 had basically was unchanged. And then this is grade 7 reading. So the team has already looked at the individual data from this benchmarking window. You can see there's been an increase in tier 3 needs. So they've already identified additional learners with some new interventions that they'll be attempting with that particular group, centered primarily around some of those comprehension pieces and reading fluency. And then this is 8th grade math. Obviously a significant increase in learners needing some tier 3 support, mostly centered around triads. I was actually in their team meeting this past week, and they were cursing triads because that's the thing that their learners continue to struggle with. And that's what most of the shift from tier 2 to tier 3 was centered around this triad kind of piece. So they were building an intervention around that. And you can see that reading again has remained pretty stable. And then again, the narrative that our middle school is the worst ever and nobody should go here and children should be withdrawn because nobody learns is simply not true. The top left is our middle school's proficiency scores last year with a sampling of other local middle schools. So again, the bottom left, we are above every one of those measures. The middle, we are above every one of their measures. The center box, we're very close. That school includes 5th grade, which can be very helpful. Elementary, especially that 5th grade year, can be a nice year for that, as Nikki was kind of pointing out. Bottom right, we are doing better than them in ELA. They're doing better than us in math. We're pretty close to them in science. And then top right, we're doing better than them in all 3 measures. Yes.
I have a question. We're talking about perception and a lot of this, and certainly that the average person isn't that familiar with these numbers, and even us on the school board aren't experts like you guys are. I think what part of the issue is that people look at this and they say 47, 26, 21, F, F, F. And an A is 90% and above. And those numbers should be like 85%. We should be getting Bs. I know that's like I'm taking myself back. Can you just kind of like, how do you answer that question? What should these numbers be? How should we be thinking about this?
There's 2 things that I would say to that. One is that even when I was in school, and it was the beginnings of, 25 years ago, was the beginnings of this high stakes testing, I don't even have context for what these learners are dealing with on a personal level, because my tests were kneecaps given one time when I was in high school, and they were easy, right? People prior to me didn't have any of this. There is no way to compare the proficiency level of public schools before the year 2002 to what we have now. So a lot of times people are saying, well, schools did better back then, but by what measure? There was no measure. So that's the first thing I remind people is the kids dealing with this, and especially the tests that they have today, have a significantly different environment, just even with that, than I had. And I at least had kneecaps. The second thing I would say to them is when I'm a teacher and I give an assessment and everybody does poorly on the assessment by what I think is the benchmark, I don't blame the students. I look at the test, I look at the instruction I provided, I look at the resources they've had access to support their growth. If I'm failing 12 of my 15 kids, that's a problem with me and my test, not a problem with my kids. And so my point with this is, if we're going to cherry pick one single data point and use it to judge the entire efforts of a school, then let's look at what everybody is having experiences with and question either what the test is measuring and is it appropriate, or is the resources and setup for it appropriate? This is not Conant Middle High School doing poorly. This is a measure that everybody is struggling with. Yep. So those are the two things I
Yeah.
have said to people.
So let's say you were to say that and I were to say, well, what I think is that, this is not what I think. What I think is this means every single school in New Hampshire is failing.
Then I don't know what conversation to have with somebody who takes that angle. I mean, I really don't, because again, I read on Facebook, there's horrible comments on there, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit too, because I've been given a soapbox today, and I'm a principal of a school of people who work very hard and don't deserve that. And one of the things that I consistently see on there is this concept or comment that back in the day, schools actually taught, coming from people whose schools had no measure like this. It's easy for somebody who has nothing to compare it to make judgments on schools today, when our experiences were nothing like this. Teachers taught, students took classroom assessments, and we moved on. So I don't truly know how to help somebody understand when all they look at is this and say schools are failing, instead of saying, what are we measuring and why? What is the total data that supports these conclusions? And how can we actually move the needle versus using rhetoric or cherry picking data at budget season to get our political narratives through the door? That's what I would say to that. And I honestly don't have an answer for that.
So, David, is there a state average proficiency for ELA?
Absolutely, yep.
And do you have it up there?
I don't have it on this slide, no, because I was comparing to regional
So,
schools.
let's say, for example, that the state average for ELA was above us, and for math and for science. Okay, so what that does is that basically says that we are not performing at a level at the average of the state of New Hampshire, correct?
Sure. Yeah. Yep. But what I would also say to that, so the gray here means that we're within the 50th, that middle band. We're not at the 50th percentile, but we're in the middle band. We're performing roughly as well as other people. The state averages include school districts with significantly different demographic makeups. We've got school districts, I could pull up Hanover on here, that probably has 90% on all of these measures, easily.
Really?
The average includes literally everybody, right? I don't think that's fair. We are not Hanover. We don't have when I'm not asking you for the resources of Hanover. But what I'm saying is, when our budget figure for this school is also presented, and I didn't have room to put it here, that's also the brown bar, which means bottom 25%. The other comment that we keep getting is we're not getting what we're paying for. I disagree with that. I think we're getting more than we're paying for, because if we were getting what we were paying for, every bar in every school would be that brown color, because that's what our average costs are that we're paying for people. But our teachers and administrators care more than that and do more work than that.
So are you saying that our kids are unable to perform at a higher level?
That's not what I'm
than
saying
their
at all.
peers?
That's not what I'm saying at all.
So I don't understand what you're saying then. You're saying that Hanover is gonna be 99 and we're gonna be 47. Okay, and I'm looking at it from perspective of our children shouldn't be any different than their children relative to their ability to answer the questions that you started this whole presentation out with, okay?
I think that's a very simplistic interpretation of a child. When I look at these school lunch balances, now that we've instituted charging for everybody in our school district, and I see the thousands and thousands of dollars that are owed for families in our district, if I was to look at the same report for Hanover, I would bet my paycheck that would not be comparable at all. When I look at the McKinney-Vento homeless numbers, because I'm in that role now for 6 through 12, and I'm seeing who's coming through, and I see children who don't have homes, who are living literally out of vehicles, and I'm expecting them to have a level 3 or above on this assessment, that's absurd. Saying that student is automatically capable of the same skill as a kid who has a stable home is not a valid measure of that learner's success or the entirety of their needs. And I'm saying that a district like Hanover does not have the same needs for their students. That's what I'm saying. If our kids were given the exact same home life, the same demographics, the same social supports, the same family structures, didn't have to worry about lunch, the number of kids I walk up to now and encourage them to go and buy lunch because they're hungry, that's the stuff that a Hanover doesn't deal with. That's the stuff that makes our children have more barriers to cross. That's the stuff that takes us more time to work through. That's the stuff that Nikki was talking about. Our kids deserve every bit of the opportunities of a Hanover. I'm just saying that putting us in a comparison with a district like that is not equitable and is not a fair representation of what our kids can do or what they overcome to get to where they do. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying that the other schools up here from our region face similar barriers. That's why I'm comparing them to our region. We are not a Hanover. We're not a Seacoast. It is what it is. Next slide, please.
If I can just add, and this is important because I've hit this theme a few times. If I were going to ask anyone in this room right now, does Hanover's community support their public education system? And do they have high expectations? No one would say no. Everyone would say yes. That's another piece that all of those kids over there have.
So we've made some goals, some progress on our goals. That first goal, which focused around literacy, instruction, and expectation, that started with Wit and Wisdom rollout. All of our staff took the trainings that Nikki talked about. We actually had our high school staff participate in that half-day training as well. Again, to get the consistency of things like the Cree language, which is one of the acronyms that get used. There's a lot of increased rigor in the grade level text in the middle school, which means that some of our high school texts that we've used in the past in 9th grade, for example, we don't want to be using anymore. So there was a lot of those pieces. We're looking at the high school level, the quantity of writing, but also the rigor expected. I know that the high school English team has a PD day coming up where they're scoping out when do they have different types of writing, low, medium, and high stakes. Where do they fit different types of informational versus argumentative versus opinion pieces, and really trying to scope that out to make sure that we're getting that more consistently with learners. And then there's an observational feedback loop where the high school is about to start going into the middle school and watching Wit and Wisdom. Middle school, we've already worked with the elementary schools. We'll be doing the same so we can get that kind of vertical piece of how things work. And then again, the other step is looking at response to intervention at all grade levels, including high school, to target intervention for those most in need. The middle school has a dedicated period, which is excellent. It's allowed the 6th grade team, which has 90-minute English blocks this year, to really focus its intervention periods on math. And it's allowed the 7th and 8th grade to fill in some of the gaps because they have half as much time for Wit and Wisdom as they really should, to make sure that, again, they're getting the ELA and the math skills. The 7th and 8th grade teams next year are going to have blocks as well. We've already sorted out how that's going to work without any impact on staffing, because our staff are doing a lot of shuffling of responsibility to make sure that we can get those 90-minute periods for our kids. Second goal with math at the middle level, all 3 of our middle school math teachers, as well as some of our special educators, attended a Eureka Math training, and we are fully implementing Eureka Math in all 3 grade levels. Eureka Math is another Great Minds program that focuses on high expectations for math instruction and spiraling of math content. We just had a full school data dive of our fall assessment scores, and also spanning back into the spring. And one of the biggest things that came up for the teams that looked at middle school math was looking at concepts like ratios and proportions that are taught heavily in 6th and 7th grade traditionally, and watching the immediate collapse in 8th grade when they moved on to other content. What's nice about Eureka Math is it continues to spiral every math progression into others seamlessly, and it questions and uses questioning techniques that mirror perfectly the level of thinking required on New Hampshire SAS. So there's a lot of excitement about that. I've seen very preliminary, we're doing our SAS interim benchmarking right now, and I've seen some very preliminary data for 6th grade in particular that looks promising. We have more kids to finish the test, but we're definitely seeing impacts of this rollout and of the training that came with it. For the third goal, which was focused on keeping kids in class, increasing their ownership over their own learning, and reducing problematic and disruptive behaviors, our school counseling team, even though they're down a counselor this year for a position that became vacant in August and we have yet to fill, the remaining team has moved forward with expanding its classroom guidance lessons. So now all 3 middle school grades are having classroom guidance on a weekly basis. That classroom guidance uses Second Step, and similar to what's happening in the elementary schools, is focused around proactive supports for learning, helping learners to strategize regulation strategies, helping with peer conflict resolution, and giving them more skill to remain successfully in class. 9th grade is also consistently getting classroom guidance through the Freshman Foundations program, and that's gone very well with some career future planning elements being bolstered, as well as a nice avenue for building up some of those regulation skills. At the middle grades, yeah.
David, will you see some improvement with that as the elementary school kids move up because they've had that?
Absolutely. This year's 6th graders, responsive classroom at the elementary schools has been 2 years now. This is the 3rd year. So this year, sixth graders, I think, are really the first group that has had enough of a consistent experience with that, and it's night and day. Their readiness for middle school is complete. It's like, take the group that we had a few years back that really had some challenges with that transition. It's like flipping it on its head. So we're already seeing some of that consistency pay off, and the second step continuing straight through, huge boost. You're exactly right. And we really are chalking up a lot of the decreases in problematic behaviors that I shared earlier to a lot of this work that's happening here. Our counseling team is also leading classroom mentoring curriculum rollout. That every single week they provide a list of activities and ideas centered around certain themes. And our mentor teachers, which are just regular classroom teachers, have been doing a beautiful job implementing those. I shared with the education committee that for the kindness month, they had one of the activities being to put out just kind of kind messages around the building. And at every spot of the building where one of those kind messages were put up, they were left alone for weeks and weeks and weeks. Nobody ripped them down. Nobody defiled them, which you might see in other schools. They were left up, except the ones where you were encouraged to take one. Like there was one display that was take a sticky note if you need one, and they were filled with these really nice messages. Those were coming down when kids needed them. But really, really positive stuff. We collect feedback from learners every single week on the activity that they did in mentoring, and that feedback has been hugely positive from the kids who have been participating in that. We have more mentoring and leadership opportunities this year. We've got the National Junior Honor Society, which is a grade 7, 8, and 9 version of the National Honor Society. Very high expectations for entry and acceptance there, but that group does service and provides some more leadership around the building. And the student councils at the middle and high school work very collaboratively, starting this year even more so. They're affiliated with the National Association of School Student Councils, and they've been doing a lot of training and things together, which has been wonderful. And then in the summertime, our admin group took a really close look at data from this past school year and continued to come up with a complete chart of alternative ideas for how we can apply learning through our discipline process and reduce the amount of time that kids are spending out of the classroom. And then with our fourth goal, which is to continue that movement towards a more robust RTI program, we've done a lot of collective staff trainings in August and then continuing with small groups throughout the course of the year on how to roll out RTI. We did our first round of high school RTI. Disappointing that we got a lot of pushback from particular parents and guardians, basically saying this isn't a class and my kid shouldn't have to do it. But of the ones who did participate, significant growth occurred, which is really heartening. And we've already, as a staff, been meeting over the month of January before we roll out the next session of high school RTI to consider how we can change the messaging or better connect with families in advance. Ames Web Plus, as with the elementary schools, has really been a game changer at the middle school level. Those teams have much more concrete data. They're doing interventions and progress monitoring more regularly, and they're using that to make quick adjustments to both the groupings and the tools that are being used for RTI. And then lots of common assessment discussion. How do we measure learning in different ways in a consistent manner that helps to capture the skill and knowledge of our learners outside of the realm of just standardized assessments? These are areas that we're focusing on no matter what, and that continues this year. You can see RTI is up there, math is up there, ELA, which with wisdom is up there, discipline, and then science is one I haven't mentioned. This year we started our formal curriculum review cycle now that our learning goal map was completed in the last school year, and science was the first discipline on the curriculum review cycle. They're doing a lot of crosswalking, looking at what we're teaching with our learning goals. How does that align with the PLDs that the state uses for SAS to basically tell us what to expect on the assessment? How can we continue to increase the correlation of how we assess in the classroom to what's done on SAS? Lots of that work has been happening this year with the expectation of increasing our science scores going forward. And then this is because I do have a soapbox with you, a couple of notes that I just wanted to make about my school and about the work that's being done here, and also about the conversations around data. So this is a little activity. I'm asking you from this singular data point to tell me which town you would prefer to live in. These are all from our region.
B plus.
Chris says the B plus.
Of course.
Sandy?
Gonna say B plus too.
B plus, okay, fair.
I don't know what the B and C plus, what that means.
Well, it's a grade, it's a data point from this particular website, niche.com, which does a lot of rankings of towns for people considering moves.
Oh, that, okay.
I've used it for teachers.
Niche, I've seen Niche, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sure, B plus. Why
B
not?
plus for you, Christine? Yep. John, any different for you?
I was looking for this.
He's cheating. He's cheating.
You're looking for an F minus?
Yeah. No, but I'm interested to hear what.
Okay, so again, one data point, no context, no comparison, no idea what goes into this. Most of you picked the B plus. Before we switch, what would be the most important thing for you to consider when looking at the rating you chose? Would it be education, crime and safety, livability, affordability of the homes, your commute, your nightlife? What's the most important thing? What would be the thing that would really catch your eye?
Education.
Okay,
Affordability.
okay.
I think it's hard to say. I think it's hard to say. For me, it needs to be somewhat well-rounded.
Well-rounded all the way across the board.
Safety.
Safety. So if there's a poor crime and safety score, that would turn you away. Okay.
Well, when we were looking for a place to move, we were attracted to Jaffrey Ringe because of its excellent schools and its strong sense of community.
So those are the things you look
Yeah.
for.
That's what we found.
Okay. Next. There's your B plus in the bottom right. Sandy, you still sticking with that with the crime and safety score only being a C plus? Weather gets a C. That's a little sad. Nightlife gets an A, if that's your
Great
thing.
Nightlife, how about that? And it's outdoor nightlife.
I don't think that's Jaffrey.
It is not.
Yeah.
Dublin Tap Room. I think
That's
they're open,
it.
they're open till 9, right?
Golden Walk.
Nightlife means family game night.
Would you be that one that's the B with the best crime and safety? Actually, the C plus has technically the best crime and safety score, and that there's so little issues with crime and safety, they couldn't even rate it.
Mm.
The point, obviously, there's a point I'm making here, right? Next slide, please, Ruben. A single rating does not tell the important parts of the story when we're making decisions. When I go to buy a car, I don't simply go to Car and Driver magazine and find the one with the best rating and snatch it up without doing any other research or understanding what does it get from the National Highway Transportation Safety Agency for safety. Does it get 5 stars, 4, 3? That's important information. Does it look like what I want it to look like? Does it drive well? If I'm going to be taking it into the woods, is it going to handle itself? Right? Those are things that are more important based on my specific area of need. One data point doesn't tell anything. And the other thing I want to make sure I say is that schools do not produce test scores. Our product, the culmination of the hundreds and thousands of hours that children spend with us, is not a single test score. Not a single person entered education to say, I can't wait to produce test scores. I've never seen a bumper sticker on a car that says, hire me as a teacher, I will give you a test score. That is not why we're here. And if that's why we're here, then get me out of the game, because I didn't sign up for that. I signed up because I saw value in helping produce human beings who can be productive, good members of society. And if you ask any teacher, that's why they're here. The product of a school is not a test score. A test score is a measure of one component of what a school does. And I've heard that comment one too many times to let it go. When I consider the things as a principal and talking with my staff and looking at my kids and hearing from my families that matter to measure our product, these are things that come up consistently. How do our kids do if they want to go to college? How are they getting accepted? How many of them leave here and get jobs that they can then turn into careers if they'd like? Or not, because some of them don't want to do that, and that's okay too. One that we don't ever talk about, I feel enough, how many of our kids stay in Jaffrey and Ringe and build their families here? That to me is much more important than how many of them scored level 3 or above on SAS, because guess what? Not a single kid has ever come back to me in my 15 years in this school and said, thank goodness that you helped me get a 3 on my SAS. Many of them come back and say, hey, I've got one student, every time he comes in, he's a pilot now, every time he comes back, wants to take me out to lunch and talk about the places he's flown his plane. I'm never available, but it's nice that he reaches out. How many of them stay engaged in our communities here and do service and help out, show up at the school, show up at their local town areas of meeting? How many of our kids say, I grew and I'm glad I had that opportunity to do that? How many of them stay connected to their families in school? How many of them on ongoing assessments continue to show progress and growth? How often are they in school? How many of them do extracurriculars and how often do they show up? Of course, standardized tests are on that list as well. And how are they productive citizens when they leave us? That's the stuff that a school produces. And more. So let's just zoom in on one. This is the last 3 years of post-secondary plans that our learners have shared with us. You can see that the class of 2022, 48% were going on to some formal education after they left Conan. This past class, that was up to 61%. And when you look below, an additional 12% told us, I'm either going part-time to school or I'm waiting a year and having a job. 73% of our kids were either in a post-secondary institution or planning to be in one shortly. That's good growth. Next. When I look at who's engaging in clubs and activities, who wants to be here, that's good information to have too. The bar on the right is the total numbers of learners enrolled at Conant Middle High School each year. The bar on the left is the numbers of learners engaged just in clubs. Over 50% every year. That is remarkable. That doesn't even include the bottom right, which is learners engaged in sports by each season. I only could do fall and winter because, of course, I don't have this year's spring numbers just yet. Again, even though our enrollment has gone down, the numbers of kids engaged has remained steady, or in the case of winter sports, which we just talked about, has gone up quite a bit. Kids want to be here and engage with things in their school. That's a product of what we're doing with kids, and that speaks to the environment that they see in their school. I also don't hear any conversation significantly about the factors and variables that children bring with them, because they are not machines. They are not business components that we can sell out and make a profit off of. They are not things we stamp out of a press and measure how many we manage to get through. They are human beings who come with significant variables that are very difficult to manage sometimes. Their home life situation and housing status is a key factor. We saw this in COVID more than ever. The environments that our children are living in and learning in are varied, and some of them are quite difficult, and we can't even really fathom what some of those needs are. The behaviors that are part of being a small human, that's a huge variable. I have 2 children, and sometimes I struggle to discipline and manage them, and they're my own. We're asking our teachers, especially at the elementary level, but all the way through, to manage dozens sometimes of other people's children. Movement into and out of our school is constant. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. The impacts that has on learning is significant. When a kid leaves for 2 months and does nothing and comes back, of course we welcome them back. To expect that learner to now be at a level 3 in the same school year, not happening. Attendance and truancy is through the roof across the state. All you gotta do is search the word attendance, and you'll read 50 articles from across our country of kids not coming to school. I can't get a kid who's missing, or in my case, 150 plus kids who are missing more than 10 days of school easily to proficiency levels, and some of them are missing a whole heck of a lot more than that. And the state has virtually no support to help get them here. That is a variable that needs to be mentioned. I know that Hanover High isn't dealing with that. Food status.
Just wanted to ask you about something you've mentioned a couple of times. I think it applies to this list. The change in billing parents for unpaid lunches. How is that working out? Is that having any effect on students getting meals, or?
So I do lunch duty every year in the middle school primarily, because that's how I get to know. I often will take 6th grade. I get to know them. They're a fun group to see. And I will tell you that circulating the cafeteria, I see 2 things that really break my heart every single day. And it's worse this year, and it's really bad in the high school, because we've never charged kids in the high school before. I see kids asking peers, can I have some of that lunch? And they're eating it, right? Taking food, going, circulating, to try to get food. And when I go to them and say, just go get a lunch, their answer is, no, I got in big trouble because I owed money. And I know who they are because I see the report. And I have a fund that I can help with, but it's limited, right? So that's one thing I see every single day, is the same learners circulating and looking for food, and many times not eating. And even with a gentle prompt, they've been yelled at, right, by somebody at home because they've gotten a bill in the mail. At the high school, significantly worse because they're not used to that. Some families have accumulated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of charges, and those kids have stopped eating. So do I have hard data for you today? No. Can I tell you anecdotally that there has been a decrease in kids eating lunch? Absolutely. No question.
Would it help if the community raise a large scholarship fund for the food?
Yeah.
Is that something we should?
I think anything that can help provide resources would be helpful. Every principal has an account called the principal's discretionary account for families where we know there's a specific need taking place and either the family doesn't qualify for free reduced lunch or sometimes the parents have chosen not to pursue that for whatever reason. I, as the principal, can't do anything about that, and it certainly isn't their kid's fault. I will tell you that those funds have drained rapidly this year because the principals have been trying to provide support. My fund has never fallen significantly fast. It's low. The middle school fund is low. I anticipate it will probably be out before the year is done. That's never happened. So whatever could be done, absolutely. But that's a key factor. Food status at home is a big deal. And we've got an entire closet on this side of the building that used to be the robotics room once upon a time that is now housing clothing, anonymous food pantries, bags that kids can take home, and they disappear. They're gone. It's a constant need to keep replenishing some of that supply. We put out hats and gloves that with a little thing that said take one if you need one, and we went through dozens and dozens of them. Gone. So the need is there for sure. Children's mood, especially on the day of a test, can be a factor on this stuff. Test taking abilities, how supportive the family is of either school in general or the kid when it comes to taking tests or assessments. The learner's individual goal and aspiration, that's a key factor, especially the older they get. When a learner doesn't see value to an assessment to their own lives, getting them to take it becomes more tricky. And it used to be a little bit easier back when SAT scores at least were used in college admissions, but they really aren't anymore. So even that piece that could get some of our highest achieving kids to sit down and really see value, that doesn't really exist across the board now. Again, that's a factor. It's not an excuse. It's just a reality. If a learner doesn't see this assessment that bears absolutely no weight on their future as important to their goals and aspirations, that's a factor in how they perform. Just is. And I'm not going to keep listing factors, but the point is these are human beings with lots of different things. And I will say that despite this, we acknowledge and we work hard to continue our best to show growth, and we have shown growth. And then I also will just mention some things that have continued to bother people in this building, and I would hope bother everybody here, but I can't speak for anybody except myself. When I see or have my staff coming to me or have families coming to me because of the things they see on social media, that's really challenging. On a single Facebook post on the Jaffrey page, I watched as people told lies about discipline. The school does nothing. The school allows bullying. The school does X, Y, or Z, all lies. And of course, these people posting this know we can't say anything to them. That's disheartening. But then on the same post, somebody posting suspension data and saying, how punitive and harsh is the school? We can't win, right? We know that. But now with social media, it's just out there constantly. And nobody seems to do anything, or if they try to, I also watch those people get kind of bullied and beat up on. Data lacking any context. Oh, look how bad these math scores are. Our schools are doing nothing. They don't deserve our funding. That's not true. It's a lie. I just proved it was a lie a few slides ago. Personal attacks on teachers, support staff, and administrators, constant. I watched a parent and making an attack on me for holding their child accountable for leaving school without permission, also make an attack on a paraeducator with a very nasty comment about them that paraeducator saw. Not okay. Hinders our ability to connect with kids. The children of those parents see these things. Some of them come in and tell us, my mom thinks you all don't know what you're doing. Okay, now score 3 on this assessment, please. I field phone calls about outrageous claims about our school. I have fielded phone calls and been yelled at and accused of having litter boxes in bathrooms because somebody posted things about that somewhere in the country. It became a thing. I had one person insist that I had replaced all of the American flags in our school with pride flags and yell at me on the phone for that. Fine, that's my job, but that's a distraction. Spending 15 to 20 minutes explaining to somebody and encouraging them to come in and no, sir, we don't have pride flags everywhere. And yes, sir, we still do the pledge. draws my time and attention away from doing what I should be doing, which is supporting our kids and teachers. Another one that keeps coming up is that somehow, because we unified our school and gave an identity for our kids that they're very proud of, that consumed huge sums of money and it was a waste of time. Not true. Much of the rebranding was free, provided to us as a service, because we were already purchasing uniforms from a company. As this board knows, much of the signage came from the Durant Fund. We didn't take money that was earmarked for other purposes, but this is a lie that just gets perpetrated. It's not right. It's distracting. And I will also say that the amount of parent guardian pushback has been really difficult the last few years, and we've persevered through it, but it's a challenge. When I have parents absolutely refusing to allow their child who has misbehaved or disrupted others to face consequences, that's hard. That hinders the ability to create the learning environment we need for kids. The number of times this year alone that we've had individuals call and state that they will not allow their child to get extra support after school, that kind of paired in with the RTI component, that's really tough. I can't close gaps at the high school level only using class time, because that would hold back every other learner. Unless you want to hire me some more teachers and I can have classes of 5, that would be great. Not going to happen. So our staff got creative and is giving of their time after school, and we've had significant pushback. That's a barrier that we have to work through. And then the bottom one is a significant one as well. In several situations, many situations, because we get a form and we get notified of the reasons why people are leaving our school for the most part, many of them leave when the school has applied some sort of expectation to their learner or asked for support in improving behavior or academics. And a lot of times the response is to withdraw that child for a period of time and then plop them back into school. That is a huge barrier. That's very difficult. And it happens frequently. There's certain individuals that it becomes almost like a pattern over the course of each school year that they're in school. That's tough. So a summary of what I would like to leave the board with. The first thing that I will say is that we have exceptional schools in this district, and this is an exceptional school. I visit schools on NEASC visits. I'm part of principal groups. My teachers have come from different places and now work here. Some have been here a long time. Another lie is that we've somehow fired every teacher that's good and only brought in bad ones. Not true. We have wonderful teachers here. And consistently, the message is that people share is that we have a positive learning environment, that truly we do inspire, engage, and empower learners, and we make a difference. And our kids tell us that. That's why they want to be here. And every person I've interacted with this school year who has come into this building from outside these communities for either accreditation visits, walking around for the purpose of FPU partnerships, just visiting to see if they want to send their children here. Every one of them has walked out surprised. I walk them around at any time of the day. Kids in the hallway, it doesn't make any difference. And they all comment on these factors. Our teachers, administrators, and staff are hard workers, and they take personally, in a way that I don't see in every school, their obligation to both the learners and the futures that their learners could have. I've got teachers in this building who have every kid they've ever had, either the college or in some cases the trade school that they've gone to. They have displays in their room and they're proud of that because they understand they're a key part of making that happen. They're not clocking in and out at 7:10 and 2:42 respectively and saying to heck with what happened next. Our learners are showing growth and they are making progress. Saying that they're not is just not the truth. Success with children does not boil down to one data point on one date in time. My opinion, to say it does, is degrading to both the product, which is the human, and the people working with them. We have instituted several shifts and changes to accelerate growth. These things will take time. We just started a huge literacy initiative this year. Why are we talking about? Part of the reason we did that was in response to some of the data we've been seeing as a district. Why are we talking like this? This is now a huge deal that we're not showing growth when we just made a change this year because of that. That doesn't make any sense. We don't even have the data for this year yet. We know, we just had a staff meeting 2 weeks ago where we talked about the importance of these assessment scores to some elements of society. We know we have to do better on that. We haven't tried to hide it. We've been more transparent than I've ever seen. And we're going to continue to work on that. Our staff is instituting test prep. We're looking at ways to build in more SAS and SAT questioning. Our juniors are about to start in all their mentoring rooms a specific tutoring program with either Khan Academy or tutor.com. We are doing what we can to support our learners in addition to bolstering our tier 1 instruction and adding RTI. And I will just say it again, a single data point does not tell the story of what's successful and what's not with a public school or really any institution. Find me an investor who looks only at the earnings per share and decides to invest in a company, and I'll shake their hand. Nobody does that. We look at multiple sources of data from multiple windows of time to make decisions. Photos. We had 26 members of the National Honor Society inducted this year, joining 16 existing members. For a school this size, that's remarkable. We have 50 members of the Interact Club. NJHS had 16 new members at the first year it was in existence. Can you go back, please? The pictures on the left are this year's Apply New Hampshire Day. 55% of our seniors applied to school on that day alone. Our raw numbers were larger or as large as schools multiple times our size. On the right is the mock election where we had the Secretary of State's office come in, and because they heard about our school, they heard we had the Chief Justice come in, they'd seen some of the growth that we've taken place, and they wanted to be a part of our mock election in particular. They sent people out to help us that provided direct education to our kids about elections from our state Secretary of State office. Our school is doing great things. Standardized test scores need work. That is a reality, but our school is still a great school. And this is what I'm going to leave up for any other questions and for consideration. This was from the chair of our NEASC accreditation visit, where our middle school became accredited by this body and our high school reaccredited. So this is part of his closing remarks to our staff. As a personal note, I have chaired more than 40 school accreditation visits for NEASC over the last 2 decades, and yours is the first school I have experienced that has accomplished as much as you have following a collaborative conference and where the professional staff has so wholeheartedly embraced the process. While it is not required of me as a chair, I am personally going to share the impressions of our team and your amazing school improvement story in a personal report to Allison Geary, the Director for Accreditation and School Improvement at NEASC. Conant Middle High School is a living example of how the collaborative accreditation process should work, and you and your accomplishments serve as excellent role models for other schools throughout New England. This person had no obligation to say any of this to us. I served on another visit with him to a different school where he was the chair more recently, and he did not say anything even close to this. And yet he chose to leave this impression from the time he spent with our kids and our staff and our community here. To me, that is far more important of a measure of our school and its growth and its professional staff and its work with kids than single test scores will ever be. Thank you. I'm here all night, most likely.
So, David.
Charlie.
I think you're fantastic at what you do, all right? But I do have 2 disagreements. One is I don't accept the premise that our learners can't perform at the average of their peers. I believe that our kids are better than that. I believe it's our job to figure out how to do that.
That's not a disagreement, Charlie. I'm agreeing with you 100%.
So we should be seeing, from a proficiency perspective, we should be seeing our proficiency increasing and our growth increasing over time. Not just one data point, but a series of data points. Okay, because a series of data points will tell a story. So that would be my expectation, would to be looking at SAS and seeing our proficiency at least increasing year over year over year. Okay, so.
And I did.
At some point, we need to be at or above that.
Charlie, I'm agreeing with you. And I thought what I presented tonight was exactly that story. Our SAS scores and our SAT scores have not been stagnant. They have grown. There has not been a regression by cohorts. There's been consistent growth. I think what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to send the message on is that the barriers and obstacles in our two communities are unique and our kids are unique. And I absolutely agree with you that every one of our children can and should be able to perform at the same level as any other kid in the state or better. But their barriers are significantly different. And to ignore that is to ignore the reality that our kids face. That's what I'm saying. And using a data point that our kids are still working towards and saying, now I can't support our school because of this data point, that's what I have a problem with. And I especially have a problem with it when we just asked our staff to invest in new programming and supports based on last year's data to now pull the rug out from underneath them and tell them that what they're doing isn't good enough. That's what I have a problem with. Our kids have shown growth. They continue to show growth, and their experience is more than that data point. That's what I'm getting at. And our staff deserve to know that their community stands behind the work they do and is expecting the growth that all of us are saying we want to see. Not that we're expecting the opposite, because that's what we've traditionally had. Lisa?
Thank you. I had a saturation point about an hour and a half ago.
Me too.
Thank you, Nikki. This is very hard. Thank you for showing the data. Just before you go, this coming election, even though it's a town election, is going to be really crucial for the students to come out to. Please, if you could find a way to encourage anyone 18 and up who has not registered to vote, to please come do that. Just, they have to know that for the first time ever, they have to prove both residency and citizenship. So a driver's license is not enough anymore. Now they need a passport or birth certificate with their driver's license or school ID. So there's more that they have to do. Please encourage them to come to it.
Yeah, again, I appreciate what you've shared here, and I certainly don't need any convincing. You know, both you guys know I have kids in both of your schools, and I coach in your schools, and I know a lot of the kids, and I see the full product, right? I only know my kids' test scores. And to be honest, I probably couldn't tell you because it's not that important to me, right? But I know the results that my kids are getting and many other families are getting. So I hear what you're saying there. And I also think it's important, right? People may have differing opinions, but to have these or at least attempt to have an open, honest, and frank conversation about what's going on. There's one thing about going on the internet and saying these things. But at the beginning of this meeting, I said, are there any comments? Of course, there are no comments. We haven't had a public comment in months, besides someone who wasn't a staff member of the school and just happened to be here because they were presenting to us. That's the truth. It's a real problem. I don't know what to do about it.
We did have an individual who came and provided a document to us to put on a town of Rindge warrant. So for the purpose of a withdrawal study, which later on in the paper you find is an attempt to actually stall stop perhaps the CTE project that we want to go forward. So that's a good public comment that we had during that time frame. Was unfortunate.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is in order for things to get better, there needs to be a conversation, and there isn't right now, right? People on the internet and people in their echo chambers, and I talk about it a lot. Obviously, I'm connected to people in the community and the schools, and I tell people on both sides, right, of the issue. And there are sides, unfortunately, that things aren't going to get better unless we talk about these things openly and honestly. So I do appreciate you providing your view here. And I think you know, to let that go on. And it does have an effect on the kids and how they feel about school. They hear that, right? I know how the kids feel about this school. They love their teachers. But to suggest that, you know, there's some sort of abundance here is, it's absurd. Yeah, I'll say that. I spend enough time here to know that. And I just think it's important that we have these conversations, and, you know, maybe someday it won't be such a fight. Because to me, like, I just see like groups of adults fighting and the kids lose, right? And it's a shame. I feel bad about that. I think it's our responsibility to try and solve these problems, and I appreciate what you guys do to try and solve it. And I think it's up to the rest of us to, you know, support what we're doing here for the kids. And I know part of it's money and test scores, and it's complicated. It's never as simple as 3 data points on a graph to tell the story. It's complicated. At least for me, it is. I'm pretty good with data. I can make it say pretty much anything I want. But it goes much beyond the data to the kids, and I firmly believe that. And you know, to oversimplify it isn't doing justice to anyone.
I will just also make a note that I taught in this school for a number of years. So I saw and was privy to lots of conversations that took place, you know, back in the day, and kind of saw and knew where pockets of greatness were happening at the time, but also was part of a sense of disconnection, right? I used to work in a modular classroom out there behind the school. That was my first several years. Nobody ever came out there. Nobody ever stopped in. I had no team to meet with. I was part of a team, but we didn't meet. There was no discussion about learning. My first day, I was handed a giant textbook and told, you're teaching ancient and medieval history. Huge topic. Here's the textbook. Literally, brand new teacher. I had no idea what any of that meant. And I was told I was teaching law, public safety, and security, and delivered about a 600-page manual from the state CTE Bureau because, voila, I was a CTE teacher as well. That was my introduction to this school as a staff member. And lots of people did lots of great things back in the day, but there was not a sense of cohesion and a sense of consistency in terms of what the expectations were. And the staff that's here now, that's always the case with them. I can walk into any team meeting and hear intense conversations about kids. What's the next training we're going to participate in? How are we going to engage with whatever this new piece is that has been kind of put on us? I can walk into classrooms, doesn't matter where I go, and see engagement with kids, high levels of thinking, teachers trying to pull and get learners sometimes who are a little bit resistant to that to come to the table and do their learning. And I see them here at all different times of the day. The staff working in this school now, as a whole, is the best I've ever seen it. That's not a dig on myself when I was a teacher or anybody else. I'm just making a comment that we are very, very blessed with who we have working in our schools. And they don't deserve some of the stuff that they face, which is why we try to shield them from that and continue to keep them focused on what matters. But I don't think people in the community realize how lucky they are with the people who are committing of their lives for their children. I do, because I've been here long enough to know. So I just want to put that out there as well.
So I'd like to throw in two cents. First of all, it's really refreshing to hear Nikki and David explain what they are doing, what you are both working on. And I know Deanna is doing the same. And it really is, I think, quite remarkable. There's a lot I don't understand about what you're doing, but there's a lot I do understand just because of the efforts that you've made, like tonight, to explain it. But just the idea that grade level teams meet together to learn about AIMSweb and not only how it works, but how they can implement it and the professional development that's going on. I'm married to a retired teacher, and I know that for many years, a big frustration was that those kind of grade level, even subject level meetings, they didn't happen. And the change is remarkable. I think that the staffing is remarkable as well. I mean, I've watched it over the years as you've brought on new people in both the administrative level and the teaching level, and I know we've got great people, and I don't blame people who have questions. I think people are just ignorant of what's going on. You know, the school is like a black box to them, and they hear stuff on the news and they read stuff on social media and they believe it. But it's really refreshing to have you two come and explain what you've been doing, but also to, I don't want to say defend, it is kind of defending, but it's more than that. It's educating people about what's going on. And we know that kids coming to school hungry and whose parents are getting bills and they know that, you know, don't go and take a meal, Tommy, because if you do, well, I'm going to get a bigger, you know, all those kind of things are part of our communities. And there's nobody to blame, but boy, what you folks are doing to try and overcome these problems is extraordinary. And it's really good for the community to hear that. That's the pushback that people need. And it is a conversation. Again, I'm not blaming people who have doubts. There's lots of reasons for it. We're at an era of communication where there's a lot of misinformation. And we don't know who to blame for that. You know, it's just the era that we're working through. You know, we all know we didn't have these crazy phones or the platforms. These social media platforms.
The one thing I will say, John, is that one group of people that isn't to blame is the kids that are dealing with the results of it, right? I think about that often. They live in a much more complex world. I see adults kind of like blaming them for like new behaviors and stuff. They didn't create this world. They didn't create the technology. They didn't buy themselves $1,000 phones. So.
And that's just another example of things that you're working through. And we,
I know they give them away for free, but retail value, Charlie.
We appreciate you and what you're doing. We really do. And I think that the more people know about what you're doing, the more they also appreciate you. Unfortunately, a lot of people still don't know. I would love to find a way to have some input from you as principals in our meeting on Wednesday. You can't give a 2-hour presentation, obviously, but to talk about the schools and how awesome they are, I think that needs to be done because, you know, the narrative that's out there is sometimes, at least, is the opposite, and it's the wrong.
But I think that's our job, John, right? We're the school board. We know this information. You know, certainly they do their jobs here every day, right? They're with the kids. It's our job to represent that to the public.
And if I can speak,
if we believe in it.
if I can speak and just say one brief thing. Thank you, first of all, for coming in and spending all this time doing this in such a short time frame. I know that you have an incredible amount going on all the time, and coming here this evening to do this and speak the truth, and to speak the truth in a way that I think has hope woven through it, because I have hope too. And I know that we all have been working very closely together, and we've been working closely together with the board as well. These last several years have been really fantastic. We're at a very interesting spot, an interesting point in time with the school district, with the communities of Jaffrey and Rindge. And I look at that CTE piece, you know, it's like, we're giving you another opportunity. We're giving you a chance. We're going to give you quite an incentive to move forward. You're only going to get positive things as a result.
This is great. This is an opportunity to maybe even be a catalyst for something else greater within the community. Maybe the concept of investing in the future, of taking a risk and seeing what we can do as a community to move forward. The communities of Jaffrey and Ringe have enormous potential. I'm not just talking about our kids here. Absolutely they do. But all the members of this community, the businesses, the future businesses, hopefully, the organizations, churches, private schools, charter schools, what have you, working together to become something much better than what we are even now. If we can dream about what our best future could be, this area has the resources to do that, to become that. But we've got to get out of our own way. And when I look at social media and when I see the stuff, I see, man, why are we fighting so hard to go backwards? Why do we want to do that so badly? Why do we not want to improve things for ourselves and for the future of our communities that we all love so dearly? We show that love in different ways. Why not? We can. The schools are doing an amazing job. This is not the same place that I came 10 years ago. Certainly in the last 3, things have transformed in a different way. And it is true. There's not one person who comes in here from outside, and we have a lot of people coming from outside. We have another group coming in on February 19th to assess this place because of being a candidate for the School of Excellence. It is recognized by people outside of our community. We have people calling us up. Nikki, you have people calling you up. I live in the town over here or over there or whatever. Can I come to your school? Can I please come to your school? Yeah. And you're like, well, show me the money, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. That happens. If we as a community, if the members of the community would see the gem that we have within our school and within the possibility of what could be, I can't even imagine where we would go. Test scores would be certainly a piece of that, increasing, because expectations would increase all the way around, but so much more. We have a mission that we engage, empower, and inspire all learners to thrive in their lives and communities. All learners, all our learners here, all of us adults as learners, and everyone in our community is learners too. We need to thrive in our lives and community. So I'm hopeful that our energy moving forward is, let's do great things together. Let's get that CTE building built. Let's have a debate about budget, fine. But let the communication be focused on what we're doing right, because we're doing a lot right, and then where we want to be, and let's get there together.
The kids need. I mean,
Absolutely.
thing that I feel like is missing in so many budget conversations, not that we have, but that the community has, is what do the kids need to thrive? It's not even, doesn't even come up in all these comments and discussions. It's just about, and I understand, so expensive the way New Hampshire public schools are funded. It's about the parents and how much it hurts them, but it's so rarely about what the kids need.
That's the report.
Well, thank you both very much.
Report.
I think that might be the fastest one yet.
I think it might be the fastest one. It's the one I spoke the least in.
That's unusual.
Yes, thank you.
You got it. And thank you.
Right. So I guess I'll ask the rest of the board. I think given that conversation, I'd like to perhaps move our public comments to, I guess we can have a third one at the end, but just to see, right? We're talking to each other. I don't know.
Don't we have a consent agenda to get through and stuff?
We do, but I think I think moving public comments up and then it's probably going to be none. There's probably going to be none, right?
Okay,
Um,
okay.
certainly to give a chance and yeah, again, it is getting late, but it's important stuff we have here to do. Charlie, I guess, and I'll give you the opportunity too, if you'd like to, as the offer stands, if you'd like to move your,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if you would like to move your presentation up, that's fine with me as well.
Not gonna make a difference. I gotta stay for the whole thing anyway.
Just making the offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll open up for a session of public comments. If anybody would like to make one, raise your hand. If not, we'll just move on to the consent agenda.
Hopefully there are hundreds of people online watching.
Someone did just text me and say, the chat is disabled.
Oh. That doesn't help. Yeah. Ruben,
Mhm.
while we're in the little in between here, just would like to throw out an idea that has been, let's say, coming back to me on different times. We, in addition to our current technology staff who are doing a fabulous job,
Mhm.
we used to have a consultant, a fellow by the name of Warren, who did a lot of, he was an employee, but he
Mhm.
worked like a consultant.
Yep,
as
I
I
remember
recall.
Warren, yep.
Yeah. And, sometimes when I think about different challenges we face, whether it's something like trying to get Deanna's
Mhm.
program to play or things come up from time to time where I think,
Mhm.
boy, if we had the resources to be able to do that, wouldn't that help? And, in facilities, which Christine and I and Sandy are on the facilities committee, they've lost several positions in the past year.
Yeah.
And people, I don't think even have a sense of the impact that has.
I can say, yeah.
So while Ruben's gone, can we hire a consultant again? No, I'm just,
I'll tell you what, I was very proud of myself at the Fringe deliberative session. I helped hook up the laptop to the screen.
Oh, good for you.
good for you.
Like, so maybe I could get the job here too. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
good
sure
at that
you
stuff.
could.
Wi-Fi.
Maybe we can give you a, what are they called?
A stipend?
Stipend. We give you. Oh, gosh.
I wouldn't take it.
Yeah, it's funny, there are lots of things that you could do better if you had more resources.
Mhm.
Lots of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd just like to say, I'm gonna have to leave by one AM, so we're not, yeah.
Chat was working on getting audio to you all.
Does anybody want to say anything? They saying yes in chat.
Yeah, we have a couple people with all the things to say.
So they would just need to. So when we'll have this up and going soon. Trying to limit comments to 3 minutes, if at all possible. But certainly if it goes over a little bit, depending on the number of individuals, that could be fine. We have allot 15 minutes for public comment. And making sure that all comments are in compliance with our policy.
While we're waiting,
Yep.
the deliberative
Yes.
slide deck. I saw Jen today and I'll be putting my inputs in tomorrow. I sent a
Mhm.
message to Carrie, but she's out.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to make sure that
It'll be,
somebody knows that I'll be able to putting stuff in tomorrow.
yeah, there are a few, yeah, there's several of us that need to put some more stuff in tomorrow, so it'll work out well. Good. And then before you speak, just your name and town of residence.
Yep. Hi, Allison Marr, JREA co-president and Ringe resident. Can everyone hear me? I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the administrator's hard work and time in putting together those presentations. It's not easy.
This is later, but I guess Lisa, just so you know, we've divided up all the articles for the deliberative session. We didn't think you were going to be here, so obviously, you know,
If you want to do one.
you don't have one, but
Yeah.
I'm doing the budget if you're interested. That's
Good time.
one. Christine's gonna be doing CTE. John's got the capital improvement. Sandy has the CBA and Charlie's doing the special education trust fund.
They're all set out. I'll stick with the supervisor.
Like,
Oh, man. Broke my hearing.
Yeah, right? Take them out quick.
okay, so we covered responsibilities for deliberative session. And Sandy, you have access to that presentation. I don't know what.
I'm doing the old fashioned way. I'm gonna be writing it on a yellow.
Good for you.
Wendy. Are you on double time yet? I said, are you on double time yet?
I can't hear you.
I said, are you on double time yet?
Said, I think everyone
Right,
online
should
can hear
be.
each other.
That's what they're saying.
We can hear each other. They're having a whole conversation without us.
I can hear it.
can hear each other.
Maybe while we do that, I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We'll come back to the comments.
Yep.
With manifests, budget transfer, stipend lists.
I'd
Somebody
like to
wanna-
make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, John.
Second,
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions, so that passes by a vote of 6-0. We have two sets of meeting minutes. We have from the budget hearing and the school board meeting number 2, which is where we voted on the articles after the budget hearing.
make a motion to accept the, too tired, the minutes for both of those meetings on the 16th.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Any questions or discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving both sets of minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions, so that passes by 6-0. We'll move on to the request to waive facility fees. And I'll roll only because I talked to Dan Bemis and he seemed to indicate reached on the
MOU.
yes, getting tired.
Yeah, no, they said they were gonna bring the MOUs, both towns indicated they were gonna bring them to the select boards and get back. So I
Okay.
don't know.
When are we gonna ratify it?
The select board members from the towns have to either, I'm told that it's been presented to them already, but there's some signatures that have to be put
Weeks
on.
ago, we said that the only obstacle for Ringe was the number of fobs.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's been resolved.
That's been resolved, but
Okay.
we don't have the final document signed. I'm waiting for the select board. Lori Radiola indicated several weeks ago, that it was gonna go in front of the Ringe Select Board. Because one of the select board members signs the document
And I think I signed.
and you sign.
I signed it probably a
Up
month
in
ago.
advance, yeah. So I'm just waiting for both of them to be returned. But we are
So does-
implementing what we've put in there in the sense of like the number of the access to the buildings, for instance.
But doesn't the MOU have to be ratified by the board, not just chairman? Unless the chairman has been authorized to act for the board.
Bring it back.
We can certainly bring it back. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it. I haven't signed it, I don't believe. I don't believe Carrie's signed it, so I'll have to. I'm not sure
I may
we
not
did
have
sign
signed
it.
it.
I don't think we
Final
did.
stuff.
I think, because I sent it to them. And they indicated, I fixed some things that we had gone back and forth on for a while, then they indicated they would bring it to the select board. So that's where we're at.
I'll double check that.
Do you have Jaffrey's back?
I don't have that one back either.
Don't get me
Meeting
wrong, I don't have
Wednesday
an
night.
issue with that.
Hmm?
I just want to know when the MOU is, agreed to.
Yeah, so it's verbally agreed to because we're implementing the contents of it, but the signatures are not there. And I don't know where the towns are with the select board process.
Well, let's waive some facility fees while we still can. How's that?
I move we honor the request for the Ringe Rec Department for the Jaffrey Grade School for their youth travel basketball as presented to request to waive the facility fee.
Thank you, Sandy.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions or discussion? We'll move to a vote. All those in favor of waiving the facility fees, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right,
All those opposed? Abstentions, that passes 6-0. And we all set over here with public comments? Believe it when I hear it.
First would be Leslie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
there we go.
Hi. I would just like there to be, first off, to acknowledge that with all the upset that happens on social media, the district does routinely post to social media. And we also share all those posts, or as many as I can, to Life in Ringe and the Jaffrey community Facebook pages, so people are informed. We post the notices of every upcoming meeting. We also post happy events that happen with the kids. And 2 years ago, we had a brainstorming session with all different members from town and who have been involved in the school as to how to better communicate with families and the public so they knew what was going on. It was kindly widely understood, believed that most people didn't read the newspaper, so maybe that wasn't the best place for us to do things, that social media was the right place, but we also added these 5 or 6 times a year flyers that we mail to every household. So that's more than just parents. And we do it at great expense to the district. And it highlights what's going on during those, that period of time. And I don't know how else to inform the public. I think the school board and the administration are doing a very good job trying to inform the public. But maybe we need to go back and think again. I don't know if at some point this becomes willful ignorance, but we need to try to reach more people because it's obvious the public doesn't feel informed. And I'm sorry, I did not say I'm Leslie McLean and I'm from Jaffrey. Thank you.
Leslie?
Yes.
Oh, no, I just said thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Next would be Allison.
Hi, Allison Marr from Ringe, New Hampshire, also JREA co-president. And I just want to say that I really appreciated the hard work and time that went into those presentations tonight from our admin team. They're right, it isn't easy in this particular climate to stand up and to really share ideas and things that I think we all know in our heart of hearts, but it's hard when you bring in that fiscal responsibility as well. And I can appreciate that they really were open and honest and sincere in their communication today. I also want to thank all of you. I know it is very challenging when your friends and neighbors may not feel like they can support some of the things that you are supporting as our school board, that you have been working really hard in, because I think you have such a close view of what's going on. And I think that speaks to what Chris was saying, that when people aren't informed, sometimes they make decisions that are ill-informed. And I just wanted to mention, on top of all of that, that a few years ago, it was probably 10 or so years ago at this point, the Ringe Congregational Church used to do like these monthly panels. And I remember a couple educators were invited to speak one night, and we were sort of just given a few talking points. There was probably 40 or 50 people there. We opened up questions from the community, and it wasn't anything that was affiliated or associated with the school district, but we were obviously representing the school district when we spoke there. But I felt like it was a really productive and eye-opening experience for community members to see what we do, to see what our challenges are, to also feel like we could have that back and forth conversation, which I think is sometimes what the problem is with school board meetings. It just feels like a lot of information. And maybe even with the information that we are sending out, even though it's great information, it's just a lot of information, and they don't necessarily get to have that back and forth. So I don't know, I know they do like coffee with a cop. Maybe we could do like tea with a teacher. But I think it would be key that everyone goes into that with the best of intentions and really being open to understanding each other and to trying to solve problems so that, like Chris said, that kids don't suffer, because those are the people who are suffering the most right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Ally.
That is all the hands that are in chat for.
Very good. Certainly glad to have those important public comments, and they do communicate right. Communication, they're both related to communication there. I think that, you know, as far as the communication committee, I have not done a good job of moving that along is probably an understatement. I've kind of failed there, but certainly I think as we move forward, maybe with our new committee structure, that we need to rejuvenate that one, clearly, I think based on what we've seen tonight. Okay, where are we at? So we'll close that session of public comments and move to diligent community. That was a week ago. It seems like it was a month ago. So are we recommending, I'll be honest, I didn't read through this beforehand. Are we going to recommend to move forward with this?
Did I read it? Yes.
What do you recommend, Lisa?
I recommend that we approve it.
It's okay. I trust you.
I think if you go down, it gives the cost, and then, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
It was up there, but yeah.
And I believe it was Leslie, you put this document together?
Yes.
So Leslie, if you're still there, thank you so much for answering these questions in such detail.
If you had any questions, I think she would be
Yeah.
fine to answer any if you have some.
It looks like there's,
But
to me, looking through it doesn't look like, it looks like she's answered them
she's answered,
sufficiently here.
she's answered these right here, yep.
A lot of yeses. So what do we need the motion to, is that what we're looking for today?
Yeah, where's the cost item?
Yeah, it's right up top.
The invoice amount would be prorated from 2,725 to 630.25. That amount would be just under 4,000. Yeah.
Make a motion to approve the listed amount of $3,990.87 to begin utilizing the diligence program.
Diligent community, yep.
Policy
Thank you, Lisa.
And to authorize the superintendent to, and to authorize the superintendent to purchase it or.
And to authorize the superintendent to purchase or pursue.
To enter into the agreement and, yep.
Got it, Wendy?
I'll second that.
Thanks, both of you. Any further question or discussion? Not, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the purchase of the Diligent Community software, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed and abstentions. Passes by a vote of 6-0. And we'll move to board committee updates.
Are you going to do program of studies approval?
Verify now.
So we have the program of studies right here. Typically, we have a presentation and such on this, but the it's going to mimic largely what has already been there. However, there is, let me pull it up. The changes and updates. So this is what you would really see as a change. You've approved it in the years past, but here are the 2025-26 new course proposals. So you have, yeah. So AP Seminar, True Crime, it's Social Studies, Westward Expansion and Growth of a Nation, Women's History, African American History, Africa to Emancipation, grades 10 to 12. African American History Reconstruction to present day. What's neat about some of these offerings, especially in the social studies realm, women's history and African American history, is that because we are a grades 6 through 12 accredited school, and we have individuals in middle school who are certified to teach high school as well, and have interest to do so, and maybe even have master's degrees in the content area itself, have expressed the desire to add more at no additional cost to the school district budget, because we have the teachers, we have the expertise to broaden or expand the learning opportunities for our students here, our learners.
So we have teachers that can teach these courses?
Yep. Matter of fact, two middle school teachers will be teaching some of these courses within the high school. The schedule has already been adjusted to allow that to be possible. While continuing, of course, their work at in the middle school level. A lot of that has to do with some work that David discussed about lengthening the blocks of English language arts. Make sure that that is a priority at the middle school. Lots of content to get through and learn, not just present. Creative arts, advanced ceramics. So we have ceramics, lots of interest. You see some of that as you go through the hallways. They want advanced ceramics. So it's just an expansion of what already is going on. Fashion, arts, and culture 2. Food around the world. That's only grade 8. And then the continuation of a multi-year process of expanding STEM. You heard Nikki talk about RMS STEM, JGS STEM is now in its 2nd year, and that of course was the catalyst for getting the same thing to happen at RMS. A lot of incubator type of programs. I wish we had been able to see Deanna's presentation, because a lot of that incubation, that starting of thinking originated and then expand due to success, and then also came up here to the middle school, high school as well, which is nice. But from a curriculum standpoint, this is an expansion of STEM: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, flight and space, medical detectives. Is that detectives? Yep.
Cool.
Medical detectives.
Ruben, when you get to the last slide, why are we removing the attendance requirement for the honor roll and high honors?
Where are we? Right here? Additionals, removed attendance requirement for honor roll and high honors.
Like you could get honor roll and never have to go to class.
I think that, I mean, I would prefer that David and Kim answer that question. But it would have its roots in competency-based education. If a learner can show competency or understanding, or if they, let's use the proficiency, scales 3 or 4, and they're not there. Well, the content itself for that course is not being in a seat. It's being able to engage with the content and understanding and show that you can engage in that content. That is my belief as to why that's the case.
Okay.
That said, there are work habit skills that they need to have.
Yeah.
And I think, being on time and so forth is important. That's a part of it. But we also, again, not having asked this question of Kim and David prior to this, although, again, attendance has nothing to do with a grade in the sense, if they can show that they understand. Obviously, attendance could impact their capacity to do something. I think that it's possible that we've had individuals in our school who have done very well in classes, shown that they understand, but because of other circumstances in their lives have a challenge to be here as often as they would even want to be. Whether it be due to homelessness, whether it be due to having another job and having to support family, whether it be due to illness, a variety of things. So I think it's trying to remove that barrier for those individuals so that they can still have that mark of success that could help them later on in life, as long as they do the work and show understanding.
I make a motion to approve the program of studies.
Thank you, Lisa.
Second.
Thank you, Charlie. Any further questions or discussion? We'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving the revised program of studies, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed and abstentions? Passes by a vote of 6-0. And now we have board committee updates. Not sure if we have any. We just met a week ago. Anyone didn't think so? So we'll move discussion items. I don't think we have any. We did.
Wait,
Oh,
I'm sorry, and this is sort of a big topic, but I do wonder, and this is a question for Ruben. So there's so much happening in our world, so many changes that are happening because I'm saying this without getting myself into trouble.
The world has changed.
The world has changed in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if our free and reduced lunch, if our Title I, Title IV programs are at risk.
So the quick answer is that Title I, Title IV, Title II, any title grant, IDEA, any of those grants are secure for the year.
Okay.
So they will be untouched. We will be able to utilize them going forward after this year. I don't have as much of a black and white understanding. I think what could be in jeopardy for us is, I think 2 months ago, I had reported that we received a roughly 1.25 million 5-year grant for mental health, wellness, MTSSB support, and so forth. That's definitely a federal grant. That was they got from the Department of Education with about 5 or 6 other districts. So that definitely would be impacted by the conversations. Now, I think it was actually a judge put that on hold until I think 5 o'clock today. I think it was.
for the states that signed on,
Okay.
and New Hampshire did not sign.
Well,
on.
and so that would explain why my meeting was canceled with the state regarding that grant. It's been put forward to February, so I don't have, I have to go check that. I just saw that today. I just was emailed today about that. But that would be at risk,
Okay.
which is in light of many things that were said or discussed tonight, is that it would be unfortunate. Because it could really be helpful to us and to our children and to our community.
Okay, thank you.
There are a lot of things that we could discuss that would be important. That I'll bring and put together in a more structured way for future superintendent's reports after we get through this kind of season. Having it anywhere from vouchers and the importance of economically helping our communities and why we need to be, and I think Lisa brought this up, why we need to think about, at least consider being more politically active throughout the state about where the money's going and the accountability. So I have strong disagreement with certain things that, you know, we've talked about relative to data, and I align myself more with what was stated today. But regardless of that, what we can all agree upon is accountability is important. And money should not go to places, in my opinion, and I think in many people's opinion, and it should make sense to any fiscally responsible individual, that your dollars, your tax dollars, go to places that are going to be held accountable. Furthermore, the money that is spent on education, we talk about transparency. If, for instance, in a EFA, there should be some accounting and some public recognition of what's happening, or not recognition, but public communication about where that money goes. And the fact of the matter is, there are other places that we can learn from. There are other states that have already gone through this and have failed and have found it to be economically hurtful, harmful to communities. And that's why I brought up earlier, I would encourage you, and I could send you some information, check out Kentucky. What they did was amazing. And that is a very different state than we are historically. So there are a lot of things. That's an example.
Yep.
But what about the things you're talking about?
Yes, if we go to board responsibilities for a deliberative session, I just want to be sure, the deliberative session, of course, is 6:30 on Wednesday. Everyone has their responsibilities. I'm just looking around to see that everyone has access to the presentation, hopefully. And I guess when
Leslie would like us to be done with everything by 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Let's make it 2.
Yeah, about 2.
2 o'clock tomorrow.
So Chris has asked me to talk a little bit about CTE, but I know that you were going to read the Warren article, and then you have a beautiful presentation.
I will have a video, a finalized video from the architect,
Yep.
which is, has some similar art pictures, photos, movements than we've seen, but put together in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
That will come to me hopefully tomorrow morning. And so I'll share that out once I have it.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking is that, first of all, the moderator is going to read the article, and
Okay.
then it would be a video right after that, because who's going to speak to it? That would be the opportunity for that. Show the 2.5 minute video, and then there could be more conversation if necessary, if need be.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess do we print that out and hand them out, or is it just? I guess I remember working on it until the last moment last year.
Yeah. Well, the reason why Leslie would like it sooner is because she wants to make sure everything's formatted in the right font and so forth. That's primarily
so maybe we could modify it afterwards, as long as we didn't.
We would need to keep things consistent. Yep.
Okay,
Um,
I just wanted to be sure.
there are a lot of handouts that we will provide. We don't
Yeah, I
usually
didn't think so.
provide the handout of, yes.
I just
of
remember
the
kind of
presentation.
modifying it like before, just a word here or there. I think
Yep.
that we'll have the basic structure for sure.
Sure.
I think she said the handouts would be online too, that they could get them.
They will have them all accessible digitally, yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm glad we talked about that, and now I'll hand it to Charlie for school board dashboard suggestions.
Okay. All right, these suggestions are for a school board dashboard, not an administrative dashboard or forensic analysis dashboard. The school board has certain core responsibilities. The dashboard should provide a quick, high-level summary of how a school board is doing regarding these responsibilities. I'm going to quickly review the key responsibilities of the school board. Then I'm going to show a few indicators that could be on a dashboard that would help the school board measure its own performance. And the data for almost all of these indicators is readily available today and can be quickly put into a dashboard. Next slide. Okay, this is RSA 189, and it spells out our duties as a school board, and it's fairly clear and straightforward. The school board is responsible for providing an education to our children, not the superintendent, not the administration, not the teachers, not even the parents. The state places the burden of education squarely on the shoulders of the school board. The school board has the responsibility to determine what and how education will be delivered. It also has the responsibility to set instructional policies that will prepare our learners for the future. The school board has the responsibility to establish a teacher performance evaluation system. And just as a rhetorical question, how many of us can explain what our teacher evaluation system is? I can. Can anybody else? Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I could.
All right. Okay, next slide. So some dashboard items should be constant reminders of how we're performing our primary duties. Education of our children, budget, and governance through documented policies. Education was covered in RSA 189.1. Budget is through RSA Chapter 32, and the governance and policies, again, it's through RSA 189.1. I have only a few example slides, 2 relative to budget, 1 regarding staffing, 1 regarding overall spending, and then 4 relative to education, and 1 with a list of other possible dashboard items. Following each set of examples are self-reflective questions that the board might ask itself. The idea being, with a dashboard at every meeting to reference, the school board could focus on the relevance of agenda items to achieving our core responsibilities. Okay. Now we're on to this next slide, which is students per staff. What this slide does is the blue line is our administrative staff. The green line is the support staff, and the orange line is the professional staff. And what it shows over time is relative to our growth or decline in the number of students per staff. And if we look at this, we can see that the top line, the blue line, is fairly stable, and the green line and the orange line are both diminishing over time based on our enrollment diminishing. Okay, next slide. So contrary to opinion, our administration staffing has remained consistent with enrollment. So the question is, what about professional and support? Well, typically what happens is when our student professional ratio goes down, what it means is smaller class sizes and more individual attention to students. Next slide. Another indicator might be operating budget cost per student. And what's been happening over the first 4 years of this slide, our cost per student has been between $18,000 and $21,000, pretty close to being flat. And then since 2022, it's rapidly increased until now we're up to, in our proposed budget, $30,000, $859 per student as far as our budgeted cost is. So that's a 52% increase over 4 years. So, next slide. The question we might ask ourselves as board members is this sustainable? Is this what we want for our communities? To have that cost per student continuing to go up, because we know the students are going to, the number of students is going to go down. Okay, next slide, another.
Wait.
Yes,
Sorry. Why do we know the number of students are gonna decline?
because we have a forecast. We have a projected forecast. It's part of our budget analysis. We produced a forecast based on births in the community and so forth. Okay, and if that number is going down, we have advanced knowledge that it's going down.
I understand the number of children being born in this country is going down, but in our community, the number of houses going up is increasing.
All I can
Yeah,
say
the
is
forecast says.
the forecast
it's gonna
says
go
it's going down.
It's interesting.
Yep, for
There
sure.
are people building houses.
And
there.
I guess my comment thus far, Charlie, I don't want to get into it, but is that, you know, you're talking about stuff to look at every board meeting. This is generally stuff that would be updated once a year that I say we should probably look at when we're developing the budget, like. Us
But
looking,
that's
us
the
looking
real
at this every 2 weeks,
That's the real point I'm trying to make.
we should look at it when we do
Is
the
the
budget.
fact that when you're reviewing an agenda, what you need to do is you need to look at those agenda items and say, how is that agenda item going to affect this particular indicator or this particular piece of the dashboard? Okay?
Okay.
If you have that in front of you, you can say exactly, you know, what you want to relative to an individual agenda item. All right, anyway, the next slide, I'm on math proficiency now. Okay, the black line is the state average proficiency. And the red line is our district level, all students, all grades, math proficiency. Okay, so I want to look at a high level, which is the district level. Now, if you look at this, I can see 4 things. First thing I can see is that our math proficiency is not at the state average level. We discussed that earlier. Okay. Second thing I see is that our math proficiency is decreasing. Now, in RMS and CHS, supposedly it's increasing. And the grade schools, supposedly it's increasing. But if we look at the district as a whole, it's decreasing. So there's something amiss there, and we need to ask the question of what? You know, why is this district as a whole math proficiency going down if everything else is going up? The next thing that I noticed is that while our proficiency is decreasing, we also have fewer students per professional. Remember the first example? Okay, so we have fewer students per professional, but our proficiency is still decreasing. Then the fourth thing is our cost per student is rapidly increasing, but our proficiency is still decreasing. So we're spending more money, more cost per student, and our proficiency is not improving. So it appears from this particular chart on math that increased spending is not increasing proficiency. If we go to reading, reading is the same thing. We're below state average. Our trend is down for the district. And again, we're spending more money and getting less proficient.
Charlie, on the
same thing,
on
the same thing is
on the
true with
cost chart,
science.
why didn't you put a state average?
The state average is up there. It's a black line.
On the cost per pupil chart? Why do you just have it on this one and not on the cost chart?
Why would I be interested in the state cost per student?
Why?
We're not taxing the state. We're taxing local taxpayers.
So you're not interested in where we compare to the rest of the district in the state?
They have different property values. Their tax rates are different. Okay, so you can't really say that that there's a comparison between towns relative to
Cost per student?
the impact of cost per student. Yes, you can determine cost per student if you know the number of students and you know the budget in each town. I don't frankly know the budget in each town.
But the state provides, it's not
But
that
the-
data, but the
but
state
there is-
provides that.
Well, I would welcome the state information of what the average cost per student is. Average budgeted cost per student is. I couldn't find that anyplace,
Right, I can help you out with that.
okay? But I'm not sure that that's gonna provide value to our district, because this is something for the board to look at. You know, why are we spending more money as a board and our proficiency is going down? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves, and then we need to find the answers.
But just like we talked about at the beginning of the meeting with the context of it, isn't the context of how much we spend compared to everybody else?
And if other
important.
communities, if other schools
The
have the
point-
same
the point
trend of
is-
going up.
The point is that we're spending 52% more over 4 years, and our proficiency is going down. So
Do
that
we,
is.
do we know what
I'm looking for
other
an
districts are
indicator.
spending more?
I'm not looking for an answer. I'm looking for an indicator.
All right,
Okay?
and then you'll investigate why. So you'll say
Yeah,
things
so you
like,
could investigate-
well, inflation's gone up, special
Yeah, not
education costs have
52%
gone up.
though. Inflation hasn't gone up
I say it's
52%.
just kind of,
Hey, guys, I'm gonna pause this piece, I'm sorry. So this is the beginning of the first visuals of a project that's been in the works for years to create this dashboard that all of us want. To have transparency available on the website in a wide variety of data points, not just one. I want to caution us right now, Charlie is showing us visually. These are some, it was put out, what do we want on it? Here's some things that Charlie wants on it. Okay, from his experience, excuse me for speaking for you, but from experience from the committees that you've been on and led, from the pieces that you're hearing from the community, but and from your own professional experience. My belief is that this database is going to be best utilized by all of our committees. Going back and saying, what do we want on this dashboard? This is showing us a visual of some pieces. They absolutely have to have more detail than that. Yes. But there's things on policy that I would love to see. How much is this particular policy like when outside organizations are utilizing our equipment and our spaces? I would like to see a dashboard showing how much time is spent by outdoor organizations utilizing our spaces. That would be really useful for me to see on here, and how much of that is being waived and how much of that is being paid. I would like to see that on the dashboard.
I think we waived
So
all of
I
it.
don't want, I think it would be a mistake for us to take this as this is what our dashboard's gonna look like, or to get bogged down in the details that Charlie is pursuing. I think that we need to see this as, here is our beginning point. This is what we can do with this very powerful tool. Let's go back to our committees, get down on the wellness. How many kids are going around and mooching off other kids? Get through. I want to know. Okay, there's things I want to know, but it's not just what Charlie wants to know. Okay?
Correct. And then the next one is science, same thing. Then the question we might ask is, why is our proficiency decreasing in all areas? Math, science, and reason at a district level. Now, we may need to go into that and do some investigation and find out. But it's the questions we should be asking.
But we're not doing that already. What's the education committee doing?
Chris, we can't do this right now.
Okay.
Charlie is
Well,
showing us.
Charlie's asking
No,
questions.
stop it.
I'm asking
Stop
answers.
it. Charlie is not just presenting a dashboard.
He's presenting his
He's
opinions.
presenting data. He's telling us to believe this data.
Yeah.
So let's stop this, Lisa. I mean, and you want to now include, you want to go back and rework what you did, what you let us do in a policy in terms of charging parents for meals that their kids have eaten and haven't paid for. you'd like to go back and revisit, that's fine. But but don't tell
But
other
this-
people to not, question the data.
A
Come on,
dashboard, wait a minute.
I have no
A
problem.
dashboard is nothing more than the data. Okay?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can present what you think should be in the dashboard, or you can then tell us what that data says.
Yeah.
And your data conflicts with the state's data, but we're not supposed to question that, right?
So, show me where my data's.
I guess.
Yeah, sure. How about this here? Published by the State Department of Education on January 7th, 2025. And they claim that the Jaffrey Range Cooperative School District cost per student is $20,655. You've got a number that's $7,000 more than that. So
Yes,
we could talk about this. We could
stop,
talk.
John.
Yeah, okay.
Stop, John.
Oh, all right,
Wait a
Charlie,
minute.
Charlie,
Stop.
Charlie, I will stop. You go ahead.
Okay. The original second slide said cost,
Got smoke coming out of my ears.
budgeted cost per student. The way this is calculated is different. Okay? The budgeted cost per student is simply our budget divided by our enrollment. It's that simple.
Simple to you. It's not so simple to everybody else. What I heard tonight doesn't jive with what you're saying, nor does it jive with the number of students that we're responsible for and are serving in this district, because it's much more than the enrollment.
I
It
can
is,
only, I
yes,
can only go by what we put on our website as budget information.
And Charlie,
Okay.
I'm saying like, I agree, let's have a dashboard, right? But don't use this as an opportunity both to present things and draw conclusions from it and then get upset with us when I say, maybe I have a different
But
conclusion.
I'm not drawing conclusions. I'm stating.
Well, you're
Wait,
putting out
all
some
right.
pretty provocative questions, I
Well,
think,
let's
and
go-
then
all
giving
right.
your opinion.
Let's go to student growth, okay? There is nothing here that's other than data. This is state data from the iAchieve website, all right?
Yeah,
From
I mean,
New Hampshire DOE.
I know this data. I can access it without you putting 3 points on
Absolutely.
an Excel
And
chart.
and it says state norm, and it says, but why would it be interesting to us?
I already know this data, Charlie. There's
You
nothing
know
new
it.
here.
You know it,
You're right, I
but
do.
the rest of the board might not.
Well, then they're not doing their job. I would.
Oh,
I-
all
I
right.
would
So
say.
you're not
No,
interested.
no.
You're not interested in student growth.
Of course I am, Charlie. I'm interested in all
Well,
of it.
that's what I'm
I
saying
sat
here.
here for,
We should be interested in student growth as a board. All right, and we should see that our math and our reading growth is below state norm.
but.
And the
this
trend is
this
still
isn't-
down, by the
This
way.
isn't new news, right? This has been talked about in the education committee, I hear. This is available
Yes.
online.
Yes,
So
why
let's-
should it be?
let's
new-
put it in a
Why should it
dashboard.
be new news? It should be an indicator of how we're doing as a district. That, I'm not.
It certainly is, as we heard earlier, it certainly is one indicator of how we're doing as a district.
That's right, and this indicator on state data may disagree with what was presented by the principals.
Yeah, I think.
And when it does disagree, it's our job to try to find out why. What is the issue here? How come the state is saying one thing? All right, where is the issue? It's our job as a school board to try to figure that out.
Agreed.
There's one data point that I see is left open, and I would suggest that it is the whole child report. And on that whole child report, we talk about math scores, ELA scores. We talk about how many children we have unhoused, how many children are not eating meals, how many kids come to school with inadequate shoes for PE. I'd like to see a whole child report so that we understand and can put all those other numbers into context. And talk about how many kids are playing sports, how many kids are sick.
Okay, it's the board's dashboard. Whatever the board feels it needs to stay abreast of what its core responsibilities are. And those core responsibilities are education, budget, policy.
So you say. It's not what our principals have said, though. And it bothers me a little bit that you seem to be cherry picking data.
I'm not
If
sure.
the state says this is how we're doing in terms of progression in math as of last June, you're fine with that data. You don't need to question it, don't want to. If the state says that our cost per student is significantly lower than what you've calculated, you don't want to hear that. You want to, and that bothers me. That bothers me.
I did not say that. I said they are two different things, which they are. They are two different things. What I am presenting.
You know, it's great to talk about two different things. I think that that is what we should be doing, dialogue. If we honestly care about not only our community, our taxpayers, and our kids, both as learners, but also as human beings, then yeah, we should talk about these things. Nothing should be thrown out and said, oh, that's and discounted as important. But that's not what I'm seeing in this process. And that bothers me, Charlie.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, listen, I'm all for a data dashboard. Right? And suggesting ideas, as Lisa said. What I wanted to avoid is starting to draw conclusions when we haven't even agreed that it's a proper data set that we should evaluate. It's your idea. I'd let you present it. We may not think that's the data to look at. You're drawing conclusions. That's fine. We may have other conclusions from that. Or we may look at that and say, that level of data is way too high to really effectively draw much of a conclusion at all. So we'll continue to work on it, but I stand by my kind of earlier statement that, these are the sort of things that I think should be looked at during, budget development time, not like 2 days before we're going to present a budget. There's just my feeling on that. And I know I shared that with you, even when you drafted it.
So
anything else on the data dashboard?
Yeah, if I
No,
can.
other than the fact that we have the ability to start it today, or actually, next week or then within the next month, because like you said, the data is most of the data that I've listed is already available. So all we need to do is decide what it is we want in the dashboard, and we can start getting a dashboard in place.
All right, we'll put that on the agenda item.
Yeah, I think not only what should be in a dashboard, but I think Charlie was attempting to put in the why there as well, but or what the purpose of it is, because there may be multiple dashboards. There may be some that are outward facing to the community. There may be some that are specifically to the board. There may be, and then there's a lot of data that's internal. There's a lot of data that the principals did not share with you tonight because it gets very granular. But you might have a dashboard might lead you to ask questions so that we could go back and then say, hey, one, we may have the answer, the questions may have already been asked, probably. But if not, here's some things that we'd like to have some information on, or this is what we'd like to have a discussion on, and so forth. Yeah,
I think we need to agree on what, appreciate the work in doing
Yep.
it, but I think we need to agree on what the data should be. And I think these are some good suggestions maybe, but
yeah.
Just leave it at that. It's we should have a data dashboard, but I think as we saw tonight, it's part of the picture.
Yeah.
And I hope we all know how to do our jobs already, right? It's nice to have a reminder from you, Charlie, but we all work pretty hard, and I think we are aware of our responsibilities.
It was disheartening to read a Life of Ringe Facebook page today,
Mm.
utilizing minutes from our board meeting that used language from the meeting to be a reason why, for instance, not to pass a CTE building and
I
pushing
can- I
that
can hear
agenda. We need to be very careful in understanding that what we put out there for our communication, especially as board members and so forth, once it gets hit in public, it is used to do things perhaps that maybe we didn't mean for it to have to do. My understanding is that all board members here were in support of or voted on that day to support the warrant article for CTE, that we all believe that it's an important thing to do, that's something that we've been working on for quite some time. It's an opportunity. And there are members of the community that have publicly put out language from our own minutes as evidence of why we should not go forward with the CTE.
Because the budget's too high.
And it has to do with this.
Yeah, it's misinformation.
Yeah, and so I think we just, whatever it is that we do, we've got to be accurate with our information. And be careful what the implications are. That's all.
Anything else on our agenda?
Just adjournment.
I so move.
John, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And I second.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can put some notes down there.